Chapter 21, Rising Star. Point of view narration. Sengoku had decided to stop the fight right there. He couldn't help his excitement during that entire fight, especially at the end. Enel had managed to exceed Sengoku's every expectation. The same was true for Garp, who was expecting the fight to end after a few punches. But the two of them weren't the only ones flabbergasted by these results. Most of the other Marines that bore witness to that fight were speechless. The ones that could speak were just gushing about how amazing it had looked. Hina's calm facade also broke for a few seconds when the fight stopped. A brilliant smile spread on her lips as she looked at Enel with amazement in her gaze. Hina knew he was strong. But this is something else entirely. She hadn't seen him in action until now. She had only ever read reports of the wounds that the pirates that Enel captured. After interrogating a few survivors, she also knew that he had some type of metal manipulating devil fruit. She wasn't all that shocked to see Enel able to turn his staff into whatever he desired, but she was shocked at the way he had applied it. The surviving pirates that he had fought all reported that his fighting style mainly relied on keeping his distance from his enemies and attacking with his devil fruit. It was only now that Hina realized. The pirates Enel had fought were likely simply not worth engaging, so Enel didn't even take them seriously. Sengoku had similar thoughts to her. He knew that Enel was at least at the level of a rear admiral just going by his achievements, maybe someone better suited to fighting large groups. But this fight managed to somewhat contradict that, showing him that Enel was already above most vice admirals. And, just going by the fight he had currently witnessed, he was likely the second fastest person in the Marines, Kizaru being the only one able to surpass the speed Enel has shown. But it did make sense to Sengoku, at least somewhat. Enel was already in his 20s or even late 20s only going by his looks alone. And he had stated that he had been training for this occasion for a while now. Garp wasn't quite pleased that the fight was stopping, but he turned off his armament hockey and crossed his arms all the same. Enel also took a natural stance as he rested his staff on the ground. What's this about Sengoku? Things were just going to get more interesting, Garp said, not knowing that his enemy was actually seconds away from losing. I figured that there is no need to further destroy the training grounds, Sengoku told his old friend while looking at Enel with a proud gaze. It's been a long time since we've had a recruit as promising as you are, the fleet admiral said while stroking his beard. Garp wanted to brag about the recruits he was training for a second, but he refrained, knowing that Enel was truly on another level compared to them. The rest of the Marines around also started cheering and clapping. Any uncertainty about Enel's recruitment was gone from the minds of the people present. All of their jealousy was promptly replaced with admiration. To be fair, I don't know how to use armament haki, so I would have lost if the fight kept going, Enel said with a sigh. He didn't need to keep something like that secret, especially since he was in the Marines to learn. Garp widened his eyes at that. Sengoku was also rather shocked. The power and skill that Enel had displayed was not belonging to the first half of the Grand Line by any means. Neither of them expected Enel to not know armament. Garp burst out laughing at that. Even Sengoku smiled a bit. I guess you still have plenty left to learn, you brat. Garp patted Enel on the back in a friendly manner. Sengoku did decide to question Enel a bit more. You don't seem to be a stranger to hockey though. I'm guessing you at least have some knowledge about hockey types, right? I have mastery over observation haki, to the point where I can predict movements. But I've never had any formal teacher for haki, so I mostly learned it on instinct. Armament simply didn't come to me at all. Sengoku's eyes widened a bit at that. Having mastery over observation haki to that extent was impressive, but the fact that Enel was self-taught made him a genius. An unpolished gem. Maybe he didn't have as overwhelming a talent for armament haki, but he would surely learn it with them, and his observation was bound to improve to the point of future sight with some guidance. That's something, kid. I figured you were predicting my moves in that bout. Garp seemed just as excited as Sengoku, his old friend, but he wasn't bothering to hide it. Thanks, old man, Enel said with a wry smile. Point of view, Enel. It's a bit of a shame the fight had to end so prematurely. I would have lost, but I would have had some more understanding of just how powerful the Marines can get. Garp is a legendary figure. He might not have been the one to catch Roger, but he had worked alongside the former Pirate King in order to take down the strongest pirate crew in recent years. I still remember reading about Rox D. Zebek and his pirates. The man somehow had most of the current Yonkos under him. Garp and Roger somehow managed to take down that pirate group. I at least got to witness his physical strength, but I do know that the true power of people in this world comes from haki. The stronger one's willpower, the more damage their armament-infused fists can do. Well, it's better that things ended like this. I don't feel like visiting the local marine doctors for a quick checkup. After the fight, we continued our talk back in Sengoku's office. Suru the crane also decided to join us as she became curious about me after my fight with Garp. Garp himself was in a really good mood. The old marine has been trying to recruit promising young men for a while now. It was clear that he cared a lot about the Marines, so having a recruit as promising as myself would obviously make his mood skyrocket. I feel a bit bad. Both Sengoku and Garp seem to be accommodating and friendly. But I am here with a purpose. I won't be staying for long, a few months at most. All until the war, where I will be technically betraying the trust they are putting in me. I need to get a lot stronger if I want to face their rage after such a betrayal. The one I'll feel the worst about betraying is Garp. The second we got back to Sengoku's office, he started giving me advice on how to train my armament haki. Now, advice from someone like him might as well be more valuable than gold. The old guy isn't holding back on the details at all. Something he said also gives me a bit of perspective on the level I've reached. I would give you some pointers on observation haki, but if you can predict your opponent's movements, then you're already on the right track. I have yet to reach any state of future sight, but my talent with observation isn't very great. I may have slightly underestimated my observation haki. I thought I was maybe a bit above average, at best, with only my range being enhanced by my devil fruit. But I guess the old Enel must have had some inborn talent with observation haki even before he had a devil fruit. Otherwise, I can't really explain how he got this much mastery over it with barely any training. Well, I guess he was using it constantly, so he did train it. I've already received my marine coat. It hasn't even been a day, and I already have a justice coat draped on my shoulders. I guess my fight with Garp must have left an impression on anyone that was present at Marineford. Right now, I was given a room inside Marineford. This will serve as my permanent residence while I train daily for the next few weeks. With Garp's help and guidance, I'll be able to gain some understanding of armament haki in a very short time. At least that's what I hope. Sengoku also instantly gave me the manuals for the 6 powers. He said that usually they would be bought by each individual recruit using their respective contributions. But he said that my contributions are already numerous and my advancement was a bit too sudden, so I had to gain mastery of some techniques quickly. Apparently, there is some unwritten rule about rear admirals having to have some mastery over at least 2 of the 6 powers, otherwise they would be considered just honorary rear admirals. Sengoku wants to solidify my position even further, so that's why he gave me all of the techniques at once, probably thinking that I'd find which suited me best faster this way. Well, now I have a lot of work to do. Better get to training. Chapter 22, Training an Admiral. Point of view Enel. 2 weeks was all it took. I went through quite a rigorous training regime made by none other than Garp himself. Unfortunately, we didn't have any beast-filled forests on Marineford, so he was forced to improvise a bit in my training. But after finally pushing through all of that, as well as daily sparring with both Garp and Sengoku, whenever he had the time, as well as quite a bit of meditation, I am now able to materialize my armament haki. It wasn't even that difficult. I could already sense and control haki spiritual energy due to my mastery over observation. I just didn't know how to approach the armament properly. Well, I can't really cover my staff in haki yet, but this is still massive progress. I also seem to have an intrinsic talent for both Soru and Jeppo, having mastered the 2 of them in just these 2 weeks. To be fair, they are the most useless to me because I could already fly and move at light speed. So I can't really brag about them much. But this seemed completely astonished both Garp and Sengoku, as well as Hina, who was a bit jealous of how easily I was able to perform the techniques. Hina is also a person I worry about disappointing with my future separation from the Marines. She has been hanging around Marineford for me basically. She could have left right after handing Sengoku the reports of my little adventure in Jaya, but she's still sticking around and training with me most of the time. It was together that we had trained the first 2 techniques. As useless as they seem to be, they might serve me well while undercover. The upside is also that I now don't even need to use my devil fruit to fly. These 2 techniques also make for extremely good training for the legs. Both of my legs have been strengthened noticeably after I started training these techniques, to the point where Garp says it's only a matter of time before I gain some mastery over Rankyaku as well. This is convenient as Rankyaku is the next of the 6 powers that I plan on mastering. With someone like Garp giving me pointers, This is only to be expected though. I get that learning the techniques this fast is unprecedented, but having someone perfectly explain how to do them to you does somewhat dampen that achievement. Well, at least in my eyes. The two of them seem surprised regardless of that. I've not done anything besides training, eating and sleeping these past 2 weeks though, and that makes me a bit tired. I am used to doing repetitive tasks, but training like this is really making me chronically tired. I need to take a short break to avoid burnout in this case. I did train for 3 months without many breaks when I was in the Sky Islands. But I was also taking plenty of time to decipher the poneglyphs, something I can't exactly do right now. So I've decided to take a break, much to Garp's disappointment. What? You want to take a few days off? The old guy seems almost offended even. I mean, I've been hard at training every day for 2 weeks. I deserve a break. At this point, I don't really bother to mince words with either Sengoku or Garp. The two of them have been nothing but agreeable to me. Treating them like anything other than friends would be rather disrespectful on my part. The fact that they both outrank me doesn't matter much, and neither of them seems to mention that whenever we eat in Sengoku's office. I can understand Garp being friendly from the way he was portrayed in the series. He is an extremely kind character that can find the good in any person and in any situation. Seeing him burst out crying during Ace's execution was rather heart-wrenching to me back then. Now that I know him personally, it's even worse. I don't want to see this old man suffer at all. Sengoku though, he's a bit harder to read. He is just as friendly as Garp, but I remember him being the devious one of the two of them. Or at least the one with the plan and the secret goal. I think that he is keeping me close in order to make sure I am a safe individual. Well, I guess you're right. But I doubt Sengoku is going to let you rest. Garp said while smiling a bit. I realize that, but I also don't think he'd make things too hard for me, I said with a confident smile of my own. Garp can't really intimidate me at this point, not even when using Sengoku's name. Point of view narration. I think I heard something about you being sent on a mission actually. Garp said as his smile became broader. Enel's head immediately snapped in Garp's direction, making his earlobes swing from side to side a bit as the old marine hero laughed at him. That's right. How about you go speak to him yourself? Garp said as he started walking away and laughing. Enel himself started making his way towards Sengoku's office to get some clarity on the situation. He waltzed up through the marine base, ignoring any gaze directed at him. At this point, most of the marines that witnessed his fight with Garp considered him to be admiral material, so no one got in his way. Enel reached the office quickly enough, entering instantly without even bothering to knock. I'm telling you, killing those vermin is only beneficial to us. A deep voice spoke out as Enel walked into the room. A tall figure was speaking to Sengoku in a familiar manner. Enel raised an eyebrow as he instantly recognized who that man was. A red costume, a marine cap and a white coat, with justice spelt on the back of it, with the yellow epaulets that signified the fact that he was in fact an admiral. It wasn't hard to tell that his person was Akainu, the admiral that most people hated in the series. But Enel didn't hate him. To Enel, Akainu was just a driven man and an extremely devoted marine. He only believed in the justice that the world government propagated. That was the only part about him that made him evil. It was simply because his beliefs in his own justice were unshakable. Akainu turned around, his eyebrow raised in confusion as he studied the newcomer. How dare you enter the fleet admiral's office unannounced? Akainu shouted, his confusion turning to anger as he failed to recognize the person that had interrupted his conversation with Sengoku. I always come here this way. Doesn't matter. Admiral Akainu, I am Enel, a pleasure to meet you, but I am here to speak to Sengoku as well. I will wait for the two of you to finish, of course. Enel's calm tone managed to slightly surprise Akainu, who was expecting the newcomer to at least get startled by his tone and apologize for intruding. He was about to step towards the newcomer, who he realized was a rear admiral due to the color of his epaulets. But right as he took the first step, he could hear Sengoku clear his throat. There's no need for the aggression, Sakazuki. He is the latest recruit that I've been talking about. Quite formidable in most aspects, but he is still not quite familiar with how the Marines operate. Sengoku was happy enough to inform Akainu of who Enel really was. Akainu's eyes widened a bit. He looked back at Enel as the young rear admiral just took a seat on the nearby couch, Sengoku's pigeon landing on his head. This is the one you've been telling me about then. He doesn't seem like a kid as you described him. But he is certainly disrespectful. This is why we don't skip the necessary steps in educating our recruits, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Akainu was quick to start complaining. He was a person that always went by the books. Enel's entire recruitment process seemed like a travesty to him. Akainu wasn't alone in this. Some other higher-ups had raised the issue with him, but he had turned them all away regardless of status. I get you reservations, but we've already talked about that. He proved himself in both achievements and fighting strength. He may not have gone through the same channels as you, but he is worthy of his position regardless of that. Sengoku was quick to defend his decisions with Enel. In a sense, recruiting him had served its purpose. It had worked like a charm, and they had a surplus of recruits in the last 2 weeks. It worked especially well after Sengoku made a deal with Big News Morgan to publicize the story all over the world, including Enel's fight with Garp, which was told without holding back any details. A new star rising among the Marines caught the attention of everyone around the world. Even some of the Yonkos took the news seriously, as it meant the rise of another admiral-level figure within the Marines. Even if Enel wasn't currently considered as strong as an admiral, the fact that he could fight Garp to a standstill on the day of his recruitment was already enough to warrant the attention of the most prominent pirates. Still, I refuse to believe he is worthy of such a rank. Personal strength isn't everything within to the Marines. Discipline is just as important. Akainu still refused to acknowledge Enel though. Sengoku was about to open his mouth again, but Enel decided to finally speak up. It's a bit awkward that you are technically gossiping about me while I'm in the room, don't you think, Admiral Akainu? Enel said, not bothering to stand up from the couch as he let Sengoku's bird make a nest on his head. Your rudeness should have its limits, newcomer. Akainu was now prepared to start a fight at this point. The only thing stopping him from lashing out was the fact that they were currently in the office of his supervisor. That's enough, you two. Especially you, Akainu. If you are still inclined about him lacking discipline, then how about you actually try to help and teach him? Sengoku was quick to stop any conflict from happening. Although what he said was a bit bothersome. Fuck me, this isn't happening, was the thought that arrived in the mind of both Enel and Akainu. Chapter 23, First Mission. Point of view narration. Enel looked at the sea in front of him with a relaxed smile on his face. The fact that there was a storm raging about didn't really seem to faze him much. The rain didn't get him wet due to a large umbrella sprouting out of his golden staff. There were quite a few things on the young Marine's mind, one of them being his current mission. Hunt down the guerrilla pirates, a pirate crew with a captain that had a 400 million bounty on his head, rather notorious in the beginning parts of the New World. It was a rather high bounty for a newcomer to be chasing. Under normal circumstances, Sengoku would have refrained from sending Enel on such a mission. But not this time. I can't believe the fleet admiral is wasting my time in such a way. This is outrageous. A voice was raging on the ship, probably speaking to some poor sod back in Marnford through the transponder snail. The enraged voice belonged to none other than Akainu, the admiral that was supposed to have a week off right now but was stuck on a ship, going for a pirate that was well below him. Enel took a deep sigh when hearing that voice. A few days had already passed like this, his opinion of Akainu souring day by day. Akainu also started hating Enel to the core, as the newcomer didn't bother much with honorifics or with respecting the hierarchy that the Marines had in place. They both were bearing with each other as best as they could. Neither had any clue why Sengoku even thought this was a good idea. Most of the Marines steering the ship were also being stressed out by Akainu's rageful shouting. This was just a random crew of another vice admiral that was supposed to be patrolling the seas where the guerrilla pirates were last spotted. They were already somewhat stressed due to the location they were constantly patrolling. This time their usual leader wasn't even present, so having Akainu's rage breathing down their necks made things even worse. At least the presence of an admiral gave them some semblance of safety. But Akainu didn't really have a great reputation for protecting other Marines during missions. He had always been the type to do anything needed in order to finish a mission swiftly. Enel smiled even more when hearing that stupid admiral's voice die down a bit. He started humming a calming tune. It was in a quiet tone, but it was still audible. Almost like wind chimes. A tune he remembered from his past life, one that he used to hum while trekking the desert sands, vast expanses of nothingness that he used to explore for years on end. It was where he had spent most of his time, sometimes with a team, sometimes alone. Not many trekked those paths by themselves, it was considered dangerous. But Enel was the type of person that always worked better when left to his own devices. And he also loved to revel in the silence. The cold of the desert nights was the most calming thing there was. If only the sky could have been more accommodating. The feeling that the stars were looking at him was what he found to be the most disturbing in his journey. Therefore he had started humming like there was an audience. Humming as if he was nothing more than a ghost in that desert, his curiosity binding him to haunt them for as long as his life allowed him to. Maybe he had always been a deranged individual after all of it contained under a facade of class and the track record of a legendary archaeologist. It also made more sense for him to be insane. Maybe everything he was experiencing now was nothing but a delusion. He had let his mind be driven by curiosity of all things. That was what had always created monsters in history. Geniuses always tended to either be remembered fondly or with horror. Enel had always been afraid that he was going to end up as the second, so he put his curiosity to some good use. Finding traces of that ancient civilization was nothing more than a stroke of luck. Without it, Enel was unsure of what would have become of him. He knew that he would have one day become bored of the deserts and that his curiosity would aim elsewhere, maybe on a much worse path. But curiosity was also what drove him to approach the mad god's messenger on earth, completely disregarding the warnings that the ancient tribal people had left for him. So, with those thoughts and memories in mind, Enel hummed. He hummed like the madman he was. He hummed without holding anything back at all. Maybe it was a sea shanty, maybe it used to be an orchestra. He had never managed to remember where that song had originated from. Enel's humming seemed to outshine the storms. The Marines that had been scrambling on deck looked at him in wonder, and the lightning and thunder even seemed to pause. The calm smile of the rear admiral, coupled with the calming tune, had managed to relax the nerves of all of the Marines that had heard it, making them look at him in admiration. Many recruits had found Enel's addition to the Marines unfair at first, but his strength was nothing to scoff at, and they all knew it. What was always brought into question was his attitude. His demeanor when interacting with the top brass of the Marine base. It appeared that, despite what the rumors would have them believe, Enel didn't seem like an arrogant man, nor did he seem like a temperamental one. The image of him, humming through a heavy storm, remained ingrained in the minds of the Marines that were on that ship, and stories of it were bound to reach the others at the base. A serene mind brings about the greatest of perceptions. One can never understand the world around them if they are too caught up in it. That was a concept that Enel lived by for the longest time. To view the world as an outsider, unperturbed by anger and sadness, the point of view of the neutral observer was bound to always be the cleanest. Enel controlled the overcharged clouds above him with that same calm smile on his face. The clouds stopped raging at his behest, the massive storm becoming nothing more than a slight drizzle. Enel's umbrella seemed to retract into itself, turning back into a staff as he let some of the water hit his skin. "Stop humming. You're being annoying." Akainu had walked on the deck, breaking the serenity of that scene for the rest of the Marines, as they all scampered back to finish their duties. "If I wanted your opinion, I would have asked for it, Admiral Akainu," Enel said as he studied the clouds. The storm quickly started kicking off again, and Enel stopped bothering to suppress it. His staff also quickly turned back into an umbrella, covering Enel perfectly, but not quite reaching Akainu. The Admiral had turned completely red at Enel's words, and rain was evaporating as it touched his body. Enel was unsure whether or not that was due to Akainu's devil fruit, or due to his anger. "I've had it with your disrespect. Do you think Sengoku can protect you forever, you lit minus? PFT. Ha ha ha." Enel's laughter interrupted Akainu's tirade before it even started properly. "You really think I'm afraid of you? Are you actually insane?" Enel held his stomach as he spoke to Akainu without holding back much. He didn't hate Akainu because of his actions in the original show, but Akainu had been nothing but a nuisance ever since the two of them were given this mission. Enel wasn't about to treat someone this rude with kindness. "You little she minus." Akainu's right arm instantly turned into magma as he was about to grab Enel's shoulder. In that instant, Enel's umbrella turned right back into a staff. Akainu didn't think much of it, but what the Admiral didn't expect was to receive a staff to the face at a speed he could barely react to. Magma splattered everywhere as his head completely disappeared from his body. The magma was thankfully mostly blown into the water, with only a few droplets landing on the deck, quickly being cooled off by the raging storm. "Don't test me, Admiral. My mood has just soured, and I don't feel too welcoming to your antics right now." Enel then started walking away without even bothering to look back. Okainu's head reformed, and his eyes were almost bloodshot with anger. He wanted so much to just explode and destroy the ship they were on completely. But he was also against needlessly damaging marine property. The admiral quickly dashed towards Enel, his fist cocked back and ready to strike the rear admiral only once, just to prove a point, to establish his superiority. A single punch was all that he needed. Enel's staff expanded at that moment though, like a thick golden shield. It blocked Akanu's haki-clad punch. Or at least it tried to. Gold wasn't an especially strong metal, it only managed to stop Akanu's fist for a half second, as he tore through the shield as if it were paper. But instead of striking Enel, his fist only hit the deck of the ship, sending a tremor through the ship that managed to shake it even worse than the storm around them. Okanu's eyes widened as he felt a strange weight on his shoulder for a second. Enel had just stepped on his shoulder, then simply jumped back on deck, landing behind him. The broken shield seemed to extend from a small handle in Enel's hand. He retracted all of it and quickly turned it into a pristine staff. We really won't benefit much from fighting like this. Okanu turned around, restraining himself, not wanting to do any more damage to the ship than necessary. He knew that Enel was right. He had somewhat lost himself in anger due to the circumstances, but he knew that if something happened to Enel, Sengoku and Garp would likely cripple him. He had seen it with his own eyes, the amount of importance the two of them put on Enel. It wasn't just that he had a promising future, the three of them got along like three old men in a park, playing chess. Enel was also a symbol for the Marines right now, so harming him in any way would warrant a huge punishment, especially while Enel was supposed to be under his care. Okanu was about to turn around and leave, not wanting to look at Enel anymore, lest his anger got the best of him again. Say, how about a small contest? A smile spread upon Enel's lips as he spoke out those words. Chapter 24, A Hunting Competition. Point of view narration. Okanu looked at Enel with a raised eyebrow, not quite understanding what Enel was proposing. I understand that you like being a good boy and you dislike going against orders. But I think both of us know that this mission is beneath us. Enel's voice rang in an almost melodic tone as his excitement was rather obvious for Okanu to see. Huh? This mission may be beneath me, but you are nothing more than a slightly stronger rear admiral, don't get too complacent. Okanu said as he scoffed a bit at Enel's words. Seriously? Do you really think daily sparring with Garp only puts me at the same level as some random pirate on the New World? Okanu looked away a bit. On one hand, he wanted to say that the old man was likely holding back on Enel. But he had managed to catch a glimpse of one of their matches before departure. Garp was using both haki and all of his physical strength, while Enel was managing to evade and bat away most of the strikes. Enel had even landed some hits himself, coating his fists with gold, forming a set of gauntlets and cladding them in haki as well. The rear admiral still lost that spar, but it wasn't a complete loss. The bout lasted for around 10 minutes. And lasting for 10 minutes against a somewhat serious Garp was something extremely few people in the Marines could do. Let's see. How about we collect as many bounties as we can within a month, then return to Marineford. Whoever has caught the most pirates with the highest bounties wins. Enel's words slightly enraged Okanu once more. We can't just go around doing whatever we want in the New World. We have a mission given to us directly from the fleet admiral. Okanu said, his irritated tone making Enel smile even more. We won't be going after actual Yonkos and their crews, we aren't starting a war. But if we want the Marines to prosper, getting rid of more pirates in the New World would be a good start. Enel said as he tapped his staff on the ground. A small strange boat was formed from the gold that came out of his staff. If our strongest just waste their time inside Marineford, we will never gain a proper foothold within the New World. The Yonkos should be the ones intimidated by us, they are the pirates after all. Enel's words somewhat managed to sway Okanu as the admiral nodded a bit, agreeing with what was being said. Still, the admiral still was a bit apprehensive about disrespecting direct orders from his supervisor. You make a point. But what if Sengoku has other plans, and going out like this gets in the way of them? Okanu had somewhat calmed down, asking a rather pertinent question. I will talk to him afterwards. The lower levels of Impel Down will be getting a surplus of new residents, unfortunately. Enel stepped into the strange golden boat, sitting down on his golden throne-like chair. See you in a month, Admiral Okanu. With that, Enel departed from the marine vessel, completely ignoring the raging storms as his flying ship took to the skies without much build-up, making Okanu's eyes widen a bit. Holdo minus. Okanu shouted, but Enel was already too far away to hear him. Point of view Enel. Traveling above the clouds is extremely nice, especially during a storm. It wasn't that hard for me to lose the Marines and gain some free time, This whole contest with Akainu is more of an excuse to have some time for myself. It also helps my mental state since I find his presence extremely annoying. I didn't even have any hatred for him at first. His demeanor and actions towards me are the only thing that spurred this distaste I feel for him. If anything happens, this is also Sengoku's fault for sending the two of us on a mission like this. He probably knows that this was an easy mission to send me on, just to get me in the swing of things. But I would classify it as too easy. A pirate that has racked up this much bounty isn't necessarily too strong. From what I've read about him, he is mostly just a menace to society. Sure, he's decent in strength, but someone like Doflamingo would kill him at any time of the day. Still, this is only to clear my head, so I will take him down, along with his crew. The guerrilla pirates, this at least gives me some type of information on their abilities. Probably a zone of sorts, but he shouldn't be with Kato. If he was part of Kato's army, Sengoku wouldn't have given us this mission. Things are already strained enough in these seas. Starting a war with the beast pirates isn't something the world government wants right now. It's a bit strange how a group of pirates can manage to do so much in this world, from taking over kingdoms to creating armies large enough to threaten the largest authorities of the world. Honestly, if all of the emperors were to join hands, the world government would fall in a matter of weeks. Well, not that all of them would join hands, they have plenty of pride and rivalry between them. I've always wondered if the rivalries between Yonkos were caused by the world government itself. That would be the only way for them to truly control the most dangerous pirates, at least to some extent. If I remember correctly, Big Mom and Kato did end up teaming up in the end during the Wano arc in the manga, but they were taken down anyway. They waited too long and other powerful pirates rose to the occasion and took them down. Luffy's sun god fruit was also revealed in that arc. It's a confusing power, it allows him to bend the world to his imagination, giving him absolute freedom. It does make sense for the world government to be afraid of it, especially in the hands of a pirate. I wonder if Shanks knew the true identity of that fruit. I mean, he had sailed with Roger before, so maybe he did. But he never did reach Raftel, so it's hard to say. This world is brewing with conspiracies, so many threads to count that you can easily lose your mind in them. It's easy to observe everything within a screen, but it becomes a lot more real when these schemes have chances of affecting you personally. Well, that doesn't really matter right now. I have quite some time to think about things before actually having to face the world government. Although the clock is ticking, I have to use this opportunity to gain as much experience as possible. I will go after as many powerful pirates as I can. Chapter 25, Hunting Pirates. Point of view narration. The guerrilla pirates were traveling the seas, merrily singing and dancing on the deck of their ships. Their spirits were high, they had just managed to ransack another island, getting their hands on plenty of gold and women. Right now their captives were all in cages, awaiting their fates among the cargo on the ship. Many of them were crying, wailing. But their cries weren't heard by anyone as the pirates partying above made even more sound. Slave trafficking was one of their main businesses, but that didn't mean they didn't get to sample the goods from time to time. Their good mood wasn't even affected by the storm they had just left behind, nor the marines they had escaped from recently. This time they also did something special. I can't believe we were able to pull this off, Captain. One of the pirates said to the man known as Branton Kimberly, his nickname was the Gorilla. He had eaten a zone devil fruit that gave him the abilities of a silverback ape, and he put it to good use, becoming a pirate and doing whatever he wanted in life. So what if the territory was protected by the Whitebeard pirates? No one was there to defend it anyway. Another of the pirates present on deck said with a laugh. Hey, there's no reason to worry about it now. They have no way of finding us on the high seas. The pirates continued talking among themselves, with the captain just listening. In the end, Branton smacked down the bottle he was drinking from on the deck, making it creak in response. Who cares about Whitebeard? He's nothing more than an old man. Even if he were to come, I wouldn't be afraid of him. The captain boasted without any regard for who could hear him. The crew started laughing in response, whether it was the alcohol or the high they were riding on. They all trusted their captain's words. Oh, a calm voice descended upon them, a cold tone that managed to make their spines shiver. I didn't realize I was hunting down a big shot. Woe is me. All of the pirates looked above. A man sitting on a golden throne, looking down at them with a bored expression, was what greeted them. His most prominent feature was his long earlobes, which he twirled in boredom. The plot thickens. So you all decided to attack Whitebeard's turf. This complicates things a bit. Would you look at that, a marine? You must have some balls, coming to us with that much gold on you. One of the pirates shouted as he took out his saber. The captain also looked up, his eyes filled with greed as he noticed the ship Enel was on. He was a bit startled by Enel's unexpected appearance, but he calmed down when seeing that Enel was just a rear admiral. It seems the newcomer wants to donate some gold to us, the captain said as his body seemed to start transforming, growing hair as his muscles became more defined. I wanted to just destroy the ship and watch them fight the sea, but I can't with hostages aboard. I don't want to further harm the people Whitebeard is supposed to protect. Enel thought to himself while stroking his chin in contemplation, completely ignoring the rowdy pirates below him. With a sweep of his hand, the ship below him was completely absorbed into his staff as he landed on the deck of the ship, among the pirates that had already drawn their weapons. Enel could see that some of them were actually using haki, albeit only around 3 or 4. So they could technically injure him if they got the chance. A shout was heard, and before any of them could react, the golden staff in Enel's hand hit the deck of the ship, impaling itself in it. Brandon looked at Enel warily. Unfortunately, no one in his crew had any proficiency in observation haki, so they were unable to find out what was about to happen. Got you. One of the pirates shouted as his haki-coated saber was cutting the air, going for Enel's head right away. Just as the pirate's blade was about to reach Enel, dozens of golden tendrils broke through the deck of the ship, impaling all of the pirates that were close to the rear admiral. The fight soon turned into a frenzy, with the pirates now being impaled and thrown around, pushing many of the crew into the sea. Enel didn't move from his landing position, he just spread his observation haki around the ship and prepared for the actual fight to start. Brandon was panicking. He wasn't expecting to run into such a powerful rear admiral, but he wasn't about to lose all of his crew to just one man. He quickly rushed at Enel, fully transformed into a silverback ape as the wooden deck underneath him cracked and broke. With his great force, he tore through the golden tendrils, shielding Enel with excessive ease. Brandon's entire body was completely coated in a thick coat of armament haki. The gold didn't have any chance of stopping that. Enel smiled when sensing this. He twirled to the side, narrowly dodging the punch of the pirate. Brandon didn't stop there though. Missing the punch, he quickly swiped towards Enel. The rear admiral jumped backwards, the golden tendrils parting ways as he passed through. A small golden thread tied to one of his wrists allowed him to continue controlling the gold around Brenton. The other pirates were quick to try and take advantage of Enel's retreat, many of them trying to stab at his turned back. Now, this would be a good time to mention the fact that Enel's accessories were all condensed with enough gold to be turned into anything in case his staff wasn't in his hands. With a flick of the wrist, Enel's rings turned into spikes, impaling the people that had gathered around him. Brandon was quick on his tail, his haki-clad arms tearing through even more golden tendrils to reach him. Enel just smiled at that. His golden rings quickly turned into a set of ornate golden gauntlets with spiked knuckles, which then turned completely black. Brandon's fist was met with Enel's in that instant. He smiled as he was completely confident in his strength. What he didn't expect was the sickening crack, followed by a feeling of numbness spreading throughout his arm. He was sent flying backwards into the golden tendrils, which quickly turned into spikes. Brandon managed to cover his back in haki in time, but not before he was impaled by one of them. With a grunt, he broke the spike and looked at Enel with hate. Looking to his side, he could see his arm limply hanging there, broken and bent at an odd angle. Sorry if I went too hard, sparring with Garp so often somewhat skewed my expectations for others as well, Enel said as the blackened gold gauntlets he wore didn't even seem to have a dent on them. Brenton realized at this moment that he was dealing with an actual monster, and the pirates that were under him had about the same reaction. Unfortunately, they didn't have anywhere to run. Enel appeared in front of the captain at blinding speeds. Brenton was about to open his mouth to attempt some type of bargain, but he was silenced by something. Enel's fist delivered a straight shot right into Brenton's face, caving it in and sending him flying through the golden wall behind him. The rest of the pirates didn't last long either. Enel just stood there with a smile on his face as he hummed his way towards the fallen figure of the pirate captain. He had already taken his staff back, and with a thought, he turned that staff into an executioner's spear, swinging it down and beheading the pirate without any hesitation. I don't feel like carrying the entire body back to Marineford. This is a good start for the contest though. Point of view Enel. It was nice fighting someone other than Sengoku and Garp for a change. At this point, I've gained a lot of proficiency in fighting without just throwing around lightning beams everywhere. Some might argue that throwing around lightning beams is pretty effective, and they'd be right, but I feel that diversifying my skillset would prepare me for any situation down the line. I've also managed to put my lackluster MMA skills to good use. They were fun when fighting Garp, but the old Vice Admiral is quite impossible to catch in a hold, as he can brute force his way out of it at any time. It's a bit odd, having to carry around a pirate's head, but at least I was able to find a sack to hold it in. Now, I've reached an issue. On this ship of the guerrilla pirates are around 30 to 40 hostages, all being held in cages. I can't exactly just leave them to die down there, so I should probably head there and free them, at the very least. At least that's what I wanted to do until I felt a figure quickly approaching the ship. Looking in the distance, I can see a blue flaming bird flying toward me at breakneck speeds. Of course, someone from Whitebeard's crew would appear. Chapter 26, Marco the Phoenix. Point of view narration. Marco followed the Vivre card he had on him all the way to the ship of the guerrilla pirates. The anger in his eyes burned brighter than the blue flames that constructed his body. The Whitebeard crew wasn't quite prepared for something like this to happen. Pirates usually avoided their territories like the plague. But sometimes an insane pirate still tried his luck in some way. That was why Whitebeard created methods for them to be alerted whenever an attack happened. This time, one of the prisoners on the ship was connected to the Vivre card that Marco was tracing. Usually, he would be with the rest of his platoon, but their captain Father Whitebeard wasn't feeling very well, so Marco decided to just deal with the issue himself. He was the first mate, after all. He was more than capable of taking care of some nameless nobodies in the New World. What he didn't expect was to see the ship completely still in the middle of the sea, and to see pirates being thrown into the sea. Marco's eyes turned into slits as he rushed the ship even faster, worrying for the passengers on board. What he didn't expect to see was a Marine Rear Admiral sitting on a golden chair and looking at him with a calm smile. Marco stopped above the ship and looked down at Enel with confusion. It didn't take long for Enel to start speaking to the flying bird. Marco, I wasn't expecting you to come this fast. I was after the guerrilla pirates, but I guess they didn't have long left to live by the looks of it. Enel said as he crossed his legs and looked at Marco with the same calm smile. Who are you? Marco wasn't exactly about to entertain Enel, he was still trying to assess the situation. Finding a chatty Marine among a mound of dead pirates didn't really paint too nice a portrait for him. Oh, that was rude of me. My name is Enel, pleased to make your acquaintance. Enel stood up from his golden chair. Marco looked at the Marine with narrowed eyes, transforming into his hybrid form and looking at Enel without any fear. Enel. Marco searched his mind for a bit. He knew the most prominent Marines. It didn't take long for him to realize who the man in front of him was. Enel's feat of fighting Garp was already well known. He was the Marines' newest Rear Admiral and someone that Sengoku tried to make the face of all new recruits. So you're that Enel, huh? Figured you'd be more of a righteous Marine by the way the newspapers painted ya. Marco finally landed on the deck of the ship. There was still plenty of weariness in his gaze, but he wasn't attacking, which Enel took as a good sign. What makes you think I'm not? Enel asked as his smile turned upwards with a tinge of amusement. Well, for one, you would have attacked me by now. You don't seem scared by me, so I doubt you'd be too frightened to act. What are you trying to gain, Enel Yoi? Marco kept his distance from Enel, but his gaze was fixed upon the Rear Admiral, the enigma that was the most prominent recruit within the Marines. Standing out just enough to shock the world, but not enough to be taken seriously by the major powers of the world. Exactly how Enel had originally planned it. Although some things could have gone better, like his relationship with Akainu, not all things were always going to go his way, and that was just the way life went. He wasn't about to start pretending to be someone else. It was already annoying enough that he was suppressing his powers. Who knows? The prisoners are downstairs. Pretty sure you already know that. They are the only reason this ship isn't already exploring the ocean's depths. Enel slowly turned around, tapping the gold chair with his golden staff. The chair was quickly swallowed up by the staff, making Marco narrow his eyes slightly. Some type of gold no metal manipulation, likely a paramecia. Pretty versatile by the looks of it. Marco instantly surmised Enel's power from that small reveal. How generous of you. I'll deal with them. I'd recommend you leave this place now, Enel Yoi. Marco would have tried to make a move on the Marine under normal circumstances if only to test the newest Marine star. But the situation didn't really allow for that. The prisoners downstairs were still bound and helpless. If they were to start fighting, the ship would almost surely sink. Which was why Marco didn't want to fight the rear admiral now. Of course. Wouldn't want to wait for the whale to come here, huh? Enel said, his calm smile not disappearing. He made an obvious reference to Whitebeard's flagship, the Moby Dick. Marco didn't react much, only continuing to carefully gaze at Enel's back as he prepared to leave. His staff quickly turned into a flying ship, and Enel sat on the only chair of that vessel. Well, till next time. Phoenix. Enel said as his small ship quickly took to the skies, surprising Marco slightly. So he can also fly. Marco thought to himself in confusion. No. It seems more like a machine that he creates using his devil fruit. That ship must have a special engine that works with his powers. Still, the newest marine star is pretty shady. Pops will be pretty amused by this turn of events. Marco then continued with his business, going towards the lower deck of the ship in order to free the prisoners. Point of view Enel. I'm rather glad Marco isn't a violent individual. Otherwise, he might have even ignored the fact that there were other people on that ship and just attacked me. To be fair, I doubt I would have won against him, just like I know I can't beat Akainu and the other admirals right now. I would still be able to flee, but that applies to most situations. It gives me quite a bit of serenity, knowing that I can pretty much escape from most situations. I've not yet met Kizaru, but I'm sure I could also lose him. I don't know why, but he seems to only be able to fly in straight lines by reflecting off surfaces. So I should be able to run away from him if I turn into a lightning bolt and travel through the clouds for a while. So this was my first meeting with the Whitebeard pirates, and it didn't go that bad. At least I didn't end up having to fight with my allies. Well, they don't know we are allies yet, but they will eventually. I'm starting to think in odd ways. I should get back to hunting down pirates. I will also have to practice the other 6 powers in my spare time. I want to at least master one of them before returning to Marineford. I think I'll pick Rankyaku. I really do need more attacking techniques under my belt if I want to get some versatility in my fighting style. Rankyaku is also something I can combine with my devil fruit to some extent. More specifically, I can combine it with the metal controlling aspect of my devil fruit. It won't be easy to master, but it will surely take enemies by surprise if used under the right circumstances. Something else has been bothering me lately. I've somehow not yet been investigated by the Chiper Paul. I was expecting to see an agent or two while I was in Marineford. I doubt the world government trusts Sengoku to the extent that they won't even bother to check up on me personally. I made sure to not show a lot about my power, so as to not stand out too much to the people that truly matter. Regardless of that, I'm sure plenty of them have taken notice of me. It can't be helped though. I can't pretend to be a recruit and hope I get access to the 6 powers and armament hacky instructors instantly. Using my special ability called Common Sense, such a thing wouldn't even be possible. That would take years and I don't feel like waiting years. Especially since a great war is already brewing. Chapter 27, Plotting and Beast Pirates. Point of view narration. As Enel ignored his initial mission and took to cleaning up the seas, another storm was brewing. Doflamingo had been paying close attention to all news regarding Enel, as he had plans to take his revenge at some point. He wasn't discouraged by hearing that Enel fought Garp. He knew that the marine hero was definitely holding back. He was pondering on how exactly to take him down, but he couldn't quite do it himself, nor could he send his people to do it. If he or his people openly killed a high-ranking marine, then his status as a warlord was going to get revoked without any doubt. He didn't really care much for that status, but it did provide him with quite a bit of protection with his business in Dressrosa. At least it guaranteed that no government agency would get involved in his business. As long as he remained secretive enough with his dealings and crimes, he could get away with anything. As Doflamingo stood there, pondering how to deal with Enel, one of his associates seemed to get an idea. Why not just contact someone from the Beast Pirates? An extremely high-pitched voice came out of a mountain of a man. Pika was the one to propose such a thing. As one of the top 3 officers of the Donquixote pirates, he had enough knowledge on who they could call upon. Doflamingo pondered that suggestion for a moment. Their dealings with the Beast Pirates were all going well until now, so they would definitely agree if it was just hunting down a random rear admiral. The Beast Pirates' captain was Kato after all. That man didn't fear any marine or government. But Kato wasn't the only notable figure in the crew. They were all a strong and extremely dangerous group of pirates, especially the top brass. That might actually work. I received word that Enel is out hunting some nameless pirates, a rowdy bunch that seem to make a lot of trouble wherever they go, so we also know his general location on the seas. Doflamingo became more and more excited the more he thought about it. Dealing with him won't be easy though. We might have to pay extra to call a higher rank from the beast pirates in order to kill him. Pika said as he scratched his chin a bit. Pika had no way of knowing what Enel's strength was, but he could easily surmise the level he had reached, both from rumors and from Doflamingo's tellings of his meeting with the Marine. They knew that he was somewhere at the level of a vice admiral, extremely specialized in speed, from the way he had taken Doflamingo by surprise. I think I have the perfect candidate, Doflamingo said eerily as a devious smile spread on his lips. Time skipped 3 weeks. The seas were calm for the Jackal pirates. They had just entered the New World, happily looking forwards to their future as pirates in the most dangerous sea in the world. Their captain had managed to rack up a bounty of 90 million in the first half of the Grand Line, and his two heads each had around 80 million on their heads. The three of them all had zone devil fruits, and all of them were dog models. Nothing special in the grand scheme of things, but it still put them above most other people, at least in physical strength and endurance. They all had big dreams. They wanted to join the beast pirates and rise in the rankings there. It was their goal in the New World, as not associating with a greater power made things exceedingly difficult in some parts of the New World. Captain, when are we heading for Kato's territory? I can barely wait to join up with such a legendary figure. One of the crewmates spoke in excitement. The captain just smiled. We're going there soon. Keep sailing, you scum. The captain had absolutely no intention of keeping his crew with him. He knew that they were all just weaklings. They didn't even have any zone devil fruits. Only the three of them were going to join the beast pirates. They were going to forge forward and reach the top. At least that was what they were dreaming about. Out of nowhere, a large storm started brewing. Fuck's sake. The Grand Line is merciless as always. One of the captain's heads spoke up, looking up at the sky with a frustrated gaze. Shut up and get to work. We need to get out of this storm, and the captain's words were silenced by something. A large lightning beam descended from the clouds, completely swallowing up half of his ship, including the people on it. The second the beam ended, the captain's eyes widened as he saw that half of his ship was completely missing. Shit. Hold on. What the fuck is this? The seawater around them was now building, having been heated up to an extreme by that lightning beam. The people that had fallen into the water were struggling and dying rapidly. The half of the ship that remained quickly started sinking. The only people that were still managing to hold on to the ship were the devil fruit users. They also didn't bother to save anyone of their crew. A large whirlpool quickly formed in the place where the lightning beam had fallen, making the scenery look almost apocalyptic. Really? A natural disaster. The devil fruit users quickly used their power to rush to the top of the ship, trying their best to avoid the water. Wow. I didn't expect you guys to struggle so much. A voice was heard from the skies. Looking up, the captain saw a figure flying on a golden ship, looking down at them while laying in what looked like a golden beach chair. The captain also noticed a large sack behind the strange man. Please help us. We'll repay you. The captain was quick to start begging for help, knowing that their chances of survival were extremely small. That was when he noticed Enel's coat. A marine. That was when his hopes died. Enel then lifted his finger and pointed it down at the pirates. A small tendril of gold appeared from the ship and swiped towards the pirates. It released a large flying slash that managed to cut the captain in two. The half of the ship they were standing on was also split in two, right down the middle. More golden tendrils expanded from the ship, killing the other two pirates in a similar fashion, then reaching down to grab their corpses. Enel then got up and collected their heads, placing them all in the sack that was behind him, half a head in the captain's case. Point of view, Enel. It's been a while since I've used my devil fruit like this. I really felt like letting off some steam. I doubt some nameless newbie pirates would have given me much fighting experience anyway. They didn't even seem like they knew hockey. I've already hunted a lot of pirates. I've not really bothered taking them alive, but that's because I have nowhere to store prisoners. I did take all of their heads as proof of their bounties. At this point, I'm pretty sure I racked up at least 8 to 9 billion in bounties from a lot of different pirate groups. I've actually run out of all of the bounty posters I collected from the Marine base. So I might have to go back a bit earlier than expected. I've at least managed to gain some mastery over Renkyaku. Turns out it's one of the simpler techniques if your body is strong enough to handle it. I was able to combine it with metal manipulation without much issue. When I manipulate metal, it basically becomes a part of me as I run electricity through it. It's only temporary though. Regardless, I should probably start heading back to base. I doubt Akainu participated in this contest, so he should probably be back to a base already. I don't want Sengoku to start worrying or something, so I'll just head there right now. Shouldn't take longer than a few days with the speed of my ship. Well, I wanted to escape, but I feel a rather strange ship approaching me. I can sense it from the distance. The beast pirates are here. More specifically, a large ship with a giant mammoth head as a figurehead for the ship. I remember this specific ship, one of the beast pirates' ships, the mammoth. Were the nobodies I killed supposed to meet up with them? Why are they in this part of the sea anyway? More specifically, why is Jack the Drought, one of Kato's 3 closest confidants, here? Chapter 28, Jack the Draft. Point of view narration. Ha 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 ha. I can't believe that dog, Heavenly Yaksha, is paying so much for a single fucking rear admiral. Jack, one of the strongest pirates within Kato's crew, laughed his lungs out with his crew as their ship sailed the seas. He was a man of large stature, towering over all of his crewmates even when sitting down and drinking from a barrel. Jack was a giant grouper fish man. Unlike most fishmen, his pale skin is identical to that of a human. He was immensely muscular, but his limbs are disproportionately small when compared to his enormous torso. He was wearing a metallic jaw mask and had a pair of horns on each side of his head. His blonde hair was worn in a ponytail and a pair of long braids. The giant man had decided to go after Enel's head, and he and his crew had been after Enel for around 2 weeks by this point. They had happened to be in the area and decided to look for him and claim the bounty that the Heavenly Yaksha, which is Doflamingo's nickname in the underworld, had placed on his head. Doflamingo had contacted them directly when realizing that they were in the area for some business related to the smile fruits. Jack instantly accepted the contract when hearing that they only had to deal with a rookie rear admiral. The giant man didn't seem to care about him being some rising star of the Marines. He also didn't take Doflamingo's warnings very seriously. Why would he take a measly warlord seriously after all? In truth, Doflamingo himself wasn't that much weaker than Jack. The two of them excelled in different things. Some would even say that Doffy was stronger in many aspects. Jack could tank a lot of damage and his armament hockey was stronger. But Doflamingo also had decent mastery over hockey, as well as Conker's haki. His devil fruit was a lot more versatile, and he had a lot more mobility. If Jack was a bit more intelligent, then he may have been more informed on such things, but to him just seeing Doflamingo's low bounty and warlord status sealed the deal. He had always been a stubborn individual. His pride was also large enough to not allow him to register a rear admiral as a threat. Without much warning, a storm started kicking up. Jack wasn't really worried though, his ship was extremely sturdy and could survive any storm. In the distance, he could see a group of newbie pirates being destroyed by the harsh weather of the New World. He laughed out loud at that, finding joy in their suffering. Although that strange beam of lightning did somewhat unnerve him, he didn't pay it much attention. The Wheater of the New World was extremely hostile most of the time. It didn't shock him that such a thing would be possible. Due to his lacking knowledge, he also believed that he wouldn't be in any danger regardless, as he had absolute trust in his defenses and didn't think a stray bolt of lightning would defeat him. Captain, we can see it. The golden ship of that rear admiral. One of Jack's crewmates spoke up with excitement in his voice. At this point, it was well known in the underworld that Enel piloted some type of odd golden ship with the use of his devil fruit. This was because he had used it repeatedly when hunting pirates. Jack looked in the distance with a bored gaze as Enel finished off the unfortunate pirates that had been stranded on the sea. Jack's excitement grew as he realized that Enel likely carried the bounties he had collected with him, which meant that he was carrying around quite the treasure. Perfect. All of you, follow his ship. He's done for. Jack spoke out to his entire crew, unaware of the fact that Enel could hear every single thing that was being said on his ship. Enel looked at the mammoth as it approached. He pondered on what to do. On one hand, he wasn't exactly afraid of fighting Jack. He was relatively sure that he'd win. But on the other, winning would also mean possibly instigating a war with the beast pirates. Enel needed the war of the best to start for his plan to work, so capturing Jack at this moment would only be counterintuitive. Starting a conflict with the beast pirates right before the war with Whitebeard pirates would either postpone the war or stop it altogether. So, Enel could under no circumstance capture Jack or collect his bounty. But how would anything be traced to him if Jack simply vanished? Enel smiled at that thought. Even if Jack was known to be looking for him right now, no one in the Beast Pirates would believe that a rear admiral was strong enough to take him down. It would take a while for them to investigate Jack's whereabouts, so Enel would have plenty of time for his plans to work. Therefore, Enel made up his mind to have his first serious fight with a person that was at the top of the world in terms of strength. Well, at least in the top 30. Enel didn't move as he watched Jack's ship approaching him with a smile on his lips. The ship eventually stopped before getting too close to the whirlpool that Enel had created. So Enel himself decided to go greet Jack. In an instant, he appeared in the mammoth's figurehead, looking at the crew with a calm smile. "Hello there. Strange to see the Beast Pirates around these parts, kind of far from Wano country, aren't we?" Enel stepped on the deck of the ship with confidence, shocking most of the pirates present. No one had expected Enel to have this much courage. They expected to have to chase him down and corner him somewhere, but they weren't exactly displeased. "Ha ha ha. The Marine is coming to us by himself. Suicidal bastard," one of the pirates said with a sadistic smile on his face. "Let's not judge him, boys. He's already prepared himself to die, might as well give him what he wants." Jack said, not even bothering to sit up. He continued drinking sake from his barrel without any concern. He didn't bother thinking about how Enel had reached them so quickly. And very few on the ship were worried about that. Jack wasn't a friendly individual, he was a ruthless person even to the ones he called allies. But the crewmates could at least trust his strength and that he could deal with most situations easily. Therefore, everyone on the ship laughed mockingly, as they looked at Enel like predators looked at their prey. Enel laughed along a bit, the calm smile on his face not changing even once. He then clapped his hands once. The clouds stirred in frustration, and the world roared with anger. A storm the likes of which the Beast Pirates had never seen soon descended on them. A lightning bolt struck each pirate on the ship, right on their head. Many were killed instantly, only the ones that were more careful and managed to use armament haki in time survived, but they were unconscious and left with severe burns. Jack instantly got up when seeing that, his gaze turned serious as the bodies of his crewmates hit the ground. It had only taken an instant for all of his crewmates to fall down defeated. They were all weaklings by Jack's standards, but people in the first half of the New World shouldn't have been able to defeat them so easily. He didn't care about them, not by any scope of the imagination. But he now realized that the rear admiral in front of him would prove to be a bit more troublesome than he initially had expected. Chapter 29, Fighting a Top Power. Point of view Enel. Ever since coming to this world, I wanted to witness it. The strength that this world's best wield. I've never been much of a battle junkie. But I was always fascinated by fighting. I even trained as a fighter, although not for a very long time. To be fair, all of my time was consumed by my main profession, so I barely had time for working out, let alone practicing MMA every day. It hasn't been long since I've come to this world. Maybe around 5 months if you put it all together. I trained like a madman in the first 3 months, doing my best to get my body up to snuff in order to properly use the speed that my devil fruit gives me in combat. Even now I am far from being able to use actual light speed when attacking with my staff. I don't know if I'll ever be. But I am still able to go faster than most people, excluding Kaizaru and maybe the Yonkos and Yonko level fighters that weren't touched much on the show. People like Shanks and his crew, and even Mihawk are enigmas, and I have no way of knowing how I compare to them. I can always constantly toss around lightning with no regard for anything. I'd probably win most conflicts with that regardless. That was also what the old Enel had been doing, mostly. But what happens when I eventually run into someone that can resist my ranged attacks for long enough to get close to me? What if someone like Kato, in his full dragon form, appears? I'm sure that monster can tank quite a few hits. He was specifically known to be annoyingly durable. Hell, Garp himself would probably be able to withstand quite a few hits with his legendary armament haki. That's why I decided that it's best to work on my body. To make up for my weak points by completely eliminating them. I'll leave the sack of heads that I collected on a piece of floating wood somewhere farther away from the Beast Pirate's ship. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to do much if I also have to worry about the other Beast Pirates present, so I'll take them out of the fight early on. Jack himself isn't someone I have any confidence in beating without the full use of my devil fruit, but I need to at least see how long I can hang on before going all out. I want to test how far I've truly come against an enemy at a higher level than myself. If I want to improve my haki, then this is the only way to do it. Point of view narration. And so, the two figures stood face to face as the rain hit both of their bodies. Jack the Drought far surpassed Enel in height, being around 8.3 meters 27 minutes 3 seconds in height when standing straight. He looked down at the rear admiral with a curious gaze. All of his crew members falling at once didn't bother him. He was much stronger than them. What bothered him was how Enel did it. The reports said something about a metal manipulation devil fruit of sorts. Jack muttered as he remembered bits and pieces from the file Doflamingo sent him regarding Enel. He sneered a bit as he now realized that likely all of the information he received was wrong. He decided that he would bring it up later with Doflamingo to squeeze more money out of him. Well, they aren't entirely wrong. Enel said as he started twirling his staff to his side, waiting to see what Jack was going to do. Bullshit. Jack quickly took out his two curved blades from his tusks. He looked at Enel with a hint of excitement. Lightning boy, you better not disappoint me. The huge man rushed Enel with the greatest speed he could muster. A speed that Enel considered quite lackluster. Jack swung one of his blades down with a lot of strength. Enel simply sidestepped the attack and jumped on the top of the blade. With his superior speed, he ran up Jack's blade as well as his arm. Enel had reached the pirate's head in an instant. Jack's eyes widened as he noticed Enel's speed a bit too late. His staff was tilted backwards as Enel struck the large man with his staff, using all of his strength and momentum in one blow. Jack's head moved back a bit as the mouthpiece that he was wearing cracked. Small pieces of metal spread around the deck of the ship. Enel quickly jumped backwards as Jack took a step back and regained his bearings. The large pirate rubbed his jaw a bit as he looked at his adversary with a bit of anger. You little bastard. With a grunt, he swung both of his blades towards Enel. The entire ship trembled as Jack let his rage control whatever reasoning he had before. Enel used his staff to push himself backwards, extending it into a tendril in the same process. The golden tendril wrapped around Jack's attacks, forming a spear point at its head and going directly for the large pirate's chest. Jack scoffed as his chest turned completely black. As if a puny attack like that can pierce my skin. The golden spear point seemed to struggle against Jack's skin as sparks arose from it. Enel scowled a bit as he pulled his staff back, bringing the tendril back to him. Or at least he tried to. Jack quickly grabbed onto that tendril when noticing Enel's intentions. Running away? I don't think so, you little shrimp. He quickly pulled on the golden tendril, not allowing Enel to move one step as his other arm was already swinging a curved blade towards Enel. In truth, Enel could have always just let go of the staff, or simply detached the part that Jack was holding onto. But he decided to take a different approach. With a small twirl, he channeled lightning into his staff. Jack's body was completely paralyzed just as he was about to hit Enel. Jack himself felt his muscles spasm as the gold he was holding electrified him and burnt his palm a bit. The gold itself was being melted by the high amount of electricity soaring through it. Enel didn't stop there though, he quickly wrapped that molten gold around the giant's arm, completely using up his staff as he only had a small string of gold left tied to his wrist. He continued to run electricity into Jack's body as the pirate shouted out loud and tried to power through the attack. Enel noticed that he had managed to finally regain control over his body. Enel crouched under Jack's blade as it came striking into the deck of the ship once more. That strike managed to sever Enel's connection to the gold as well, giving Jack some breathing space. Enel kicked slightly upwards at Jack's outstretched hand, and a flying slash rushed towards the heavily muscled arm only to be stopped by Jack's thick muscles and armament hockey. The flying slash was deflected upwards and hit the main mast of the ship, cutting it in two as part of it fell onto the ship, creating further tremors. At this point, Enel noticed that the ship they were on simply wouldn't be able to last for long if they kept going. But he didn't want to stop yet. With a grunt, his rings and accessories turned into the same ornate golden spiked gauntlets, which then quickly turned completely black. Enel was quick to arrive in front of the giant that was still recovering from the previous attack. With a shout, he started punching Jack's chest with fervor. Each punch seemed to push the rain away slightly, each punch was faster than the last. Jack was slowly being pushed back, but his chest was still barely even getting scratched. Enel got a sense of danger then. He quickly used Soru and disappeared from Jack's range as the pirate slammed both of his hands in his previous location. One of the hands was still covered in molten gold, which at this point also turned black. You little coward. I dare you to try and face me. Jack was beyond enraged. Enel had dodged every single one of his attacks. There was simply no way for him to touch the rear admiral. Enel smiled a bit. Fine. I'll take you on. Enel decided to finally try to take an attack with his body, knowing that he would never improve his armament haki fast enough if he simply dodged everything. Jack flashed him a crazed smile. He brought both of his hands above his head and brought them down in a violent manner. Enel turned his arms upwards, both of them coated in haki and clad in gold, attempting to stop the giant's attack. The second Jack's fists made contact with Enel's palms. A shockwave was released that seemed to almost push the clouds away. Enel could feel his bones cracking as the golden gauntlets that protected him almost immediately burst. The ship underneath him cracked uncomfortably. He then felt himself falling. The deck of the ship had finally given way, the part underneath him broke and he was sent tumbling to a lower level. Jack laughed out loud as he looked at Enel's state. Haha. You weren't that much after a minus. His words were stopped by something heavy. He was kicked to the side of his temple. Enel had suddenly appeared beside him, taking him by surprise and sending him flying through the other 3 masts that were still standing on the ship. And with that, the ship was already almost done. With regret in his mind, Enel looked in the distance at Jack. His eyes held a calm gaze as he studied his opponent one last time. His kick had managed to deal some damage. Jack's mouthguard was completely off, his temple was bleeding slightly, and there was blood coming out of his nose as well. Enel sighed regrettably. In the end, he wouldn't get to see much of Jack going all out. Jack himself wasn't expecting Enel to be able to hurt him at any point. He had only landed a single hit, and now his entire arm had slight burns on it, and he was also kicked rather heavily in a moment of carelessness. The injuries were still nothing to the large pirate though. He used his free arm to quickly peel off the molten gold from his skin. Without the electricity coursing through it, it was also starting to cool off. While pulling off the gold, he also pulled off some skin from the parts of his arm that were somewhat burnt. Armament haki had protected him from having his entire arm burnt off. Jack scowled at the gold as he tossed it on the ground. He hadn't expected such a high temperature to come from mere gold. Enel's powers were getting more and more confusing for him as he glared at the rear admiral hatefully. It was rather unfortunate that he had no way of knowing gold's melting temperature, which was comparable to that of magma. Enel could have gone much further, but he stopped as he still wanted to keep using his staff, and gold was rather expensive. After all, gold was one of the few metals that could evaporate under high enough temperatures. A rather sorry set of circumstances you seem to find yourself in. Enel mocked Jack a bit as he wondered how to end the fight properly. One of his arms shook slightly, but Enel was otherwise uninjured. The ship broke at the perfect point, which made Jack's only landed hit rather ineffective. I don't want to hear that from a little rat that can only dodge around. If you let me hit you once more you are dead. Jack shouted, enraged by Enel's words. Maybe your words would have more of an intimidation factor if you actually had any chance of hitting me by yourself. Enel ended up crouching down on a broken part of the mast as he calmly looked at Jack. I could keep fighting this guy for a few days, and I still won't get any closer to killing him at this rate. At least not by going this easy on him. Jack was enraged even further when seeing Enel's relaxed attitude, but he took a deep breath and he calmed himself down. He quickly rushed at Enel with his greatest speed. He brought down his sword towards Enel. This time his gaze was a lot more focused as his blade turned completely black. Enel flexed his left leg, preparing to simply dodge to the side again. That was when he noticed it. The moment he flexed his leg, Jack's attack shifted more to the right, attempting to cut off his head as he was dodging. Jack was finally taking things more seriously. He actually started using observation haki. Something that was impossible to survive without against an opponent faster than yourself. Enel let his body go soft as he looked at Jack's blackened blade almost reaching the space between his brows, aiming to split him in half. Jack smiled sadistically as he looked at his blade sink into his enemy, completely splitting him in two as dust and splinters spread everywhere on the ship. At this point, the mammoth, Jack's ship, was already starting to sink. Jack released a boisterous laugh as he was about to retrieve his blade and turn around. Then he felt a strange weight on his blade. His gaze turned towards his opponent again, only to see Enel squatting on his blade in a relaxed manner. Jack took a step back, making Enel fall off his blade. Future sight. Well, it's not perfect, but using armament haki won't work with me. At least not when using such obvious patterns. The last part was left unsaid. Enel had parted his body right at the moment Jack had attacked. making it look like he had been split in half by the hockey-clad blade. Jack might have had the stronger armament haki, but Enel's observation was also leagues above that of Jack. If things continued like this, they'd be in a stalemate for who knows how long. Enel was also smart enough to realize that. It's about time I end this. Chapter 30, Real Unnatural Disaster. Point of view Enel. In the first place, someone of his level would be extremely difficult to deal with, so it's only normal that the situation would turn into a stalemate. This has gone quite a lot better than I had expected, but I was still unable to deal any significant damage. Some small burns along the arm and a few bruises aren't anything to someone like Jack. To actually damage him I have to go all out. I've already gotten a bit more perspective into where I stand in this fight. My armament haki has no way of overcoming his. Most of my hits were rather ineffective because of that. And attacking with gold isn't very effective in the first place, especially since I can't even coat my weapons with armament yet. So I'll rely on my devil fruit from now on, at least to end this fight. I'm curious about how much he can withstand. Point of view narration. In that second, any notion of holding back disappeared. Enel took to the skies, ignoring Jack's surprise as he looked down on the sinking ship that the large pirate was on. I won't lie to you, I was expecting a lot more from someone of your level. But I guess you weren't anything special in the end. Enel said as he pointed his finger towards the gold that was on the deck. A lightning tendril seemed to extend to it at speeds that Jack could barely follow with his observation haki. The gold rose from the ground and got pulled straight at Enel. The gold then circled around Enel, forming a large circle floating behind him. A pair of golden drums reminiscent of the ones he had when he came to this world. This time, they weren't attached to him, merely floating behind him, spinning slowly as they seemed to release endless arcs of pure lightning, overcharging the stormy skies even further. Jack looked at the scene with clenched fists. He was unsure of what was coming next, but he finally figured out that his enemy wasn't going to hold back anymore. He had seen Enel take out his crew in the beginning. He knew that attacking physically wasn't the only thing Enel could do. But now that he was faced with Enel going all out, he was unsure if he was supposed to feel gratified or terrified. Don't think I'll go down this easy. Jack instantly shook his head, disregarding that last thought with a scowl on his face. He immediately started transforming, taking on the appearance of a gargantuan orange-haired mammoth. It doesn't matter what you do. You won't ever get through my defenses. He also covered his body in a thick layer of armament, making him look like a black-haired mammoth. It was the strongest defense he could muster, and something that he had complete confidence in. Enel looked down with a smile. Defense is your strongest point after all. I wonder how you'll fare against something like this. Enel's hand pointed upwards as the storm clouds seemed to gather above the ship. The lightning in all of the overcharged clouds quickly started gathering in one single point, a sphere of electricity that seemed to be radiating enough heat to make Jack sweat from a distance. More and more lightning kept gathering at that point, and the sphere grew more and more in size and density. After around 15 seconds, the sphere itself was large enough to cover an entire island. It completely dwarfed the mammoth. At this point, Jack realized that feeling scared might have been a bit more accurate for the situation. Try and survive, maybe you have a chance. But your ship sure doesn't. Enel then clenched his fist and brought his hand down in a violent motion. The lightning sphere seemed to get compressed, becoming a completely purple ball of plasma. The sphere of lightning descended on Jack and his ship. Jack roared as he prepared to take the attack head-on. Although compressed, the sphere was still larger than Jack's ship, completely engulfing it. Dodging wasn't even an option. The attack descended on him at lightning speed, and Jack was surrounded on all sides by the sea. Even the ship he was on was already half sunk. The sphere expanded in an explosion that seemed to swallow up the sea for kilometers all around it. The sound of the raging thunder seemed to dwarf that of Jack's screaming voice. The sphere didn't stop when hitting the surface of the sea. It continued downwards, hitting the bed of the sea and evaporating all of the water underneath it. Enel looked on, as the sphere of lightning he had created evaporated the seawater around them, boiling it and creating tsunamis on all sides. Enel's eyes quickly widened when noticing the waves and tides rising as high as the clouds. My hard-earned bounties. He quickly dashed towards where he had left the sack filled with heads. Thankfully the tsunamis had yet to reach it. He grabbed the sack and flew with it above the clouds. Enel then sat down on a cloud and sighed in tiredness. Such a large attack wasn't exactly easy to pull off. It had taken quite a bit of stamina from him. Still, he could keep fighting regardless of that. If there was a need to anyway. The tsunami of boiling water seemed to almost reach his feet. It seemed determined to flip the seas upside down as it continued its journey. The sphere of lightning finally dispersed after a full minute, leaving a large hole in the middle of the sea, going all the way to the bottom. Inside that hole, Enel could see a smoldering figure, looking like charcoal, but somewhat melted. He could still recognize Jack. His trembling body made it seem like he had somehow survived that attack, but there was no saving him. Enel landed in the hole he had created as the sea started quickly trying to fill it with water. To think you'd still be alive. Truly wondrous, the strength that stands at the top of this world. Enel spoke to the melted, almost corpse of Jack. The large and previously intimidating pirate didn't even have eyes anymore. He couldn't even speak. All that he could feel was numbness, the lightning having fired all of his nerves and melted part of his brain. His powerful armament haki had protected him, but it couldn't protect him properly from such an attack. It only served to prolong his suffering. As he was now, he didn't have much more than a minute or two to live. Even those few minutes were granted to him due to his immense endurance. Someone like Doflamingo would have died much quicker underneath that kind of attack. I'll admit, fighting you gave me a lot of insight. Have a good one, Jack. The large pirate couldn't even hear Enel. He was simply pondering the choices he had taken in his life to have led to him attempting to fight such an opponent. Blinded by his own hubris and confidence, maybe he would have survived more had he taken his opponent seriously from the start. Or had he not gone for such an opponent at all. But in truth, he had no way of knowing his enemy's abilities. Now, there he stood, in a crater in the sea that was already filling up with water. A massive whirlpool formed above him. Him being a fisherman meant that seawater couldn't drown him. Maybe he should have thrown himself into the sea to try and escape. But the seawater itself was boiled and evaporated by Enel's attack, so that wouldn't have worked either. In the end, Jack simply couldn't imagine a scenario where he could survive such a ruthless attack. He was left to ponder his last moments at the bottom of the scorched sea. Back at Wano country, an underling was sitting down, his eyes filled with boredom. His task was to look at the pieces of vivre cards from the top brass all day. His job was to instantly report any minute changes that might have indicated that any top member of the Beast Pirates was in danger. A boring task and rather uneventful, as very few could confidently say they'd be able to kill one of Kato's top brass. Today was different, however, as that nameless underling looked in fear at Jack's vivre card being burnt up and disappearing. It was almost instant, and the underling was paralyzed with fear as he looked at the burnt-up remains of Jack's card. The underling quickly stumbled and ran to inform the others. This news was bound to shake the Beast Pirates. But in truth, it was going to shake the new world in its entirety. Point of view Enel. That was certainly an eventful day. In the end, I managed to gain a lot more perspective on how my attacks would fare against the top of the world. I know from the show that Kato has the highest defense in the Beast Pirates and Big Mom should also have a stronger body than Jack here. So, if I were to hazard a guess, most top cadres of Yonko's wouldn't be able to survive this type of move. Jack's specialization was his endurance, but the others, like Katakuri, Smoothie and Cracker, have different strong points. As long as I keep my head straight, I can dodge most attacks headed my way. And with the firepower that my devil fruit provides me, I should be able to win most fights I find myself into. I'd rather train a bit more before the war though. I need to strengthen my armament hockey quite a bit if I want things to be a bit smoother in the future. Some would still be able to attack me while I charge my larger moves, so I need to at least be prepared for that. Jack couldn't fly, so he was kind of like a fish in a barrel. But others won't sit tight while I charge my attacks like that. I'd say this tired me out as a good workout would. I've already regained most of my stamina. I should start heading for Marineford now. I have quite a few bounties to deliver. Chapter 31, Arriving at Marineford and Punishment. Point of view narration. Sengoku didn't quite know what to make of things. Akainu and Enel were both reportedly hunting down scores of pirates. They were recorded to be going a bit above what Sengoku had initially requested. Sengoku somewhat expected that type of thing from Enel. The rear admiral wasn't exactly one to listen to anything besides training. He wasn't exactly accustomed to their ways yet. But he hadn't expected that type of thing from Akainu. Sakazuki had always been an extremely serious and by-the-books marine. Also extremely ruthless and unforgiving to anyone who even showed slight disrespect to the traditional ways of the Marines. His extreme and oftentimes cruel way of handing justice to criminals was what made him a prime candidate for the future position of Fleet Admiral in the eyes of the world government. To Sengoku, Sakazuki going out on his own to clean up the beginning of the new world was nothing short of a miracle. It didn't take long for Sengoku to understand that some type of competition was going on in between the two of them. Sakazuki used one of the fastest marine vessels to rack up as many bounties as he could. And Enel used his flying golden ship, which Sengoku already knew about from the Jaya Island reports. The fleet admiral had tried asking more about how the ship worked, hoping to be able to use the design of the ship to create a new type of marine vessel. But Enel was rather secretive about it, only saying that it had worked with his devil fruit. But Enel was secretive about a few other things as well. Like his backstory. He never went into too much detail, only giving them a basic and rather hard to believe story. How were Garp and Sengoku supposed to believe that he was from an island in the middle of the Grand Line? Enel claimed he came from Little Garden. No one could verify it, but the two old men knew from reports that there weren't any inhabitants on the island besides two old giants. How exactly did his devil fruit even work? The gold he always manipulated seemed to become hot whenever he changed its shape. He never bothered to explain it, only saying that he didn't really know what the fruit was named since he just found it randomly on Little Garden and ate it on the spot. Even now, Sakazuki reported that he was returning to base while Enel was only giving them radio silence. Sengoku had tried to call the rear admiral. He had personally given him a marine-issued transponder snail. It was rather disheartening that Enel didn't respond even once. At least until someone finally responded when Sengoku was calling, only for the old fleet admiral to find out that Enel had left his transponder snail at Marineford. The one that had answered was none other than Hina, who just happened to be inside Enel's room. For some reason, Sengoku was a bit too weirded out to ask. He also chose to refrain from getting involved in his subordinates' private lives. Garp also didn't really seem to care. The old man cared more about seeing the results of the competition. He had high hopes for his newest recruit. He hoped to be able to laugh at Akanu's face for losing to a rookie for at least the following month. Garp thought that it was possible enough Enel was just that talented to him, nothing that Enel did could surprise him in any way at this point. Enel had managed to gain armament haki in an extremely short time, and he had basically trained without rest to master 2 of the 6 powers at the same time. Armament haki was something that took years to master in the first place, so Enel most likely had some type of inborn talent for it. His near-perfect mastery over observation haki also certainly played a part in it. Enel's progress was staggering. Even if his armament was considered weak, some Marines would spend a decade training and still not gain the same results as he did. Garp genuinely hoped that Enel would not become an admiral though. He didn't want to see someone like Enel at the beck and call of the celestial dragons. The admiral position certainly came with a lot of boons. It brought about a lot of respect. But it also meant that you were to become one of the official bodyguards of the celestial dragons, and the government would have even more control over your actions. Garp was not all about that, so he simply stayed a vice admiral. He had hoped that his grandsons would also follow this path. They were all brats that he saw promise in, and he had hoped that he wouldn't be the only one in the family to become a Marine. Fate was a cruel mistress though. It wasn't like Garp saw Enel as a grandson or anything. Enel did manage to become friends with Garp in that short time. It was the same for Sengoku. The time the two of them had spent with Enel was rather short, but with him, they could speak freely. He didn't care about putting up a facade. He also didn't seem to care about ranks or formalities. He was extremely open and easy to talk to. Garp had spent a lot more time with him than Sengoku, and Garp told Sengoku about everything. They both considered Enel to be an interesting person. They were still unsure of how he viewed the world government and what his definition of justice entailed, but they knew he wasn't a bad person. He also seemed to have a talent with people. Both Garp and Sengoku were rather weirded out about how quickly they had taken a liking to him. But they couldn't really hold it against the new Marine. He simply seemed to know his way around befriending others, acting just friendly enough to warrant a similar response, but not friendly enough to appear like he had some ulterior motive or that he was in some way disingenuous. Still, friends or no friends, subordinates were supposed to listen to the higher-ups. Sengoku had received news that the guerrilla pirates, Enel's initial target, were dealt with not long after Enel had departed from Akenu. So Enel was technically just doing whatever he wanted while purposefully not finishing his mission and handing in a report. This annoyed Sengoku quite a bit. I don't need another Garp, was the thought that was most prominent in his mind as he gazed at his old friend eating his rice crackers while sitting on his couch. Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Admiral Akainu has returned to base. A rear admiral shouted as he entered Sengoku's office. Sengoku was about to complain about how the Marine had failed to salute him, but then he noticed that the Marine appeared to be rather frantic. What happened? He asked as he also stood up. "Yes, sir." He came back with a lot of bounties. But he also collected a bounty from the Big Mom pirates by mistake. The rear admiral spoke as he trembled a bit. Sengoku snorted a bit as he realized how big the issue could get. "Please tell me it was at least someone unimportant," Sengoku said as he rubbed the bride of his nose in frustration. The rear admiral was looking more and more anxious. That was when Sakazuki himself entered. It's Charlotte Oven, a member of the Big Mom Pirates, was traveling to some kingdom in the first half of the Grand Line, probably collecting some sweets for Big Mom herself. That fat slob, Okainu said as he looked a bit pissed off about the whole situation. Sengoku took a deep breath. He decided to calmly think about everything before making a decision. "Did you kill him?" The fleet admiral asked while looking out of the window of his office, his pigeon perched on his head as he glared at the Marine base he was ruling. "No, I captured him. He is missing a limb or two, but still alive," Okainu said as he crossed his arms. "I see. You did well. I don't think the Big Mom pirates will act right away, but they will definitely call for us to visit them and bring Oven to them. Especially since he is one of Big Mom's children," Sengoku said as he stroked his beard. "Fee, disgusting pirates thinking they own the seas. I will go if necessary, but if I do so, I will kill that pirate scum right at their front door," Okainu said as he huffed a bit of smoke. As an admiral, he was not afraid of either Big Mom or her crew. He strongly believed that he had done the right thing as it was his job as a Marine to hunting down pirates in the end. "I know you would. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. But we don't want a war, Sakazuki. A war will leave us weakened and the other Yonko will take advantage of that. The world government would also not agree to the war." Sengoku seemed to be more and more annoyed as he thought about the situation. They were the Marines, yet they couldn't apply their justice freely in the new world exactly because of the influence of the Yonko. Winning a war against Big Mom was not impossible for the Marines, but there were plenty of other pirates that would take advantage of the Marines' weakened forces right after the battle. There would also be plenty of people taking advantage of the territories that were previously under Big Mom's protection, which would only make for more scandals. Okainu didn't say anything. He knew that a war wasn't a good idea in the current climate, at least not without a concrete clause. Wow, what a conundrum we find ourselves in. That was when Enel walked into the room, dispersing the heavy mood with a few words as he strolled inside without any worries. "You brat. You came back already," Garp said as he looked at Enel with a smile on his face. The whole talk about the war didn't interest Garp much. If there was to be a war, he'd fight in it, if not then whatever. He didn't care either way. "Of course I did. Ran out of bounties to collect," Enel said as he twirled one of his earlobes around his finger. "I'm afraid the situation isn't a joking matter, Enel. Many lives could be lost if war truly begins," Sengoku said as he looked at Enel with an appreciative smile. "This is all your fault," Okainu said as he looked at Enel with a bit of anger. "I only proposed a hunt. You were the one that decided to kidnap a baby wolf cub and bring it back to us. The rest of the pack are obviously not going to be happy about it." Enel sat down right beside Garp. The old man handed him a packet of rice crackers and the two of them just started eating mid-conversation. Sengoku looked at the scene, a tear threatening to fall from his right eye. "I should never have let Garp train him. This is very disrespectful. We've had this talk before already. And if you hadn't proposed that stupid competition, I wouldn't have felt the need to go after such weaklings." Enel just smiled as he munched on a rice cracker. "Stop," Sengoku said as his anger also finally rose. "Pointing fingers won't help anyone," the fleet admiral said as he rubbed his temples in annoyance. "Enel, while Akainu was the one to bring in Oven, you are the one that convinced him to disrespect orders. I was pondering on how to punish you for a few weeks. I think I finally have the right idea." Sengoku seemed like he had cracked the code when he was speaking, and Akainu seemed happy about what he was hearing. But Garp and Enel were still just eating and looking at Sengoku as if the situation had nothing to do with them. "You will be the one to take Oven back to the Big Mom pirates. Fighting them won't benefit us right now. We must preserve our strength. We can't simply start a war without the world government's approval." The world's balance is already shifting constantly. We can't afford to mess with it for no good reason. It's a long journey, but I expect you to be done within 3 months. Okay, sure. Enel just looked at him, his face didn't show much emotion, and his mouth kept devouring rice crackers. The Marines are doomed after my retirement, was the only thing on Sengoku's mind when watching that scene. Chapter 32, Reasoning and Weight. Point of view narration. Ha ha ha. I can't believe that brat is scamming us like this. Garp laughed as he slapped his knee in joy. I wouldn't call it a scam. He did bring down many pirates, he is at least deserving to be rewarded. I can't promote him again, but since he just asked for some materials urgently, I can provide them. Sengoku said as he took off his cap and looked out the window, the concern in his gaze was evident. I don't get it, Sengoku. Why are you sending him if you are so concerned about it? Garp asked to the side, looking at his old friend with a strange smile on his face. The fleet admiral himself looked a bit annoyed by the whole situation. You don't get it, Garp. I am not concerned for him, he can take care of himself. I am more concerned about the possibility of a war occurring. Sengoku took a sip of his coffee as his pigeon sat on his hat and looked at Garp. Sakazuki, that brat, he really doesn't like that you chose to not keep that pirate captive. We are supposed to be the authority on the seas, backing down like this might make others look down on us. Garp said as he crossed his arms a bit. Starting a war right now won't benefit any side. The world government also wants to avoid it, so it really can't be helped. Sengoku said, plenty of frustration etched in his tone. Is that why you didn't send someone like Sakazuki there? Well, good choice. I doubt Enel would be one to start a war. Indeed, but I am rather concerned that the Big Mom pirates would be the ones to attack in this case. Under better circumstances, I would have told one of the other admirals to deal with this, as the possibility of them being attacked is extremely low. Sengoku said as he rubbed his temple in frustration. Kizaru and Okiji are both away on missions, one of them is hard to get in touch with and the other is with the Celestial Dragons, so neither is currently available. I doubt the Big Mom pirates want war anyway. Linlin isn't exactly known to be too affectionate towards her children. Garp scoffed as he took out a packet of rice crackers. This isn't about affection, Garp. This is about pride. Big Mom will most likely act out because we stepped on her toes by capturing Oven. His state is also not that great, he had to be treated by our best doctors already. It's more about how much both sides are willing to lose due to their pride. If an admiral went, then they wouldn't act up directly, at least. But if anyone with less strength is going, they might return with a few missing limbs. Sengoku said as he took out a few files to look through them. Heh. Sure. I doubt Enel of all people would get himself in that situation. And even if a fight was gonna break up, he can always retreat with his flying ship. Garp had absolute confidence in Enel's abilities at this point, especially after the large harvest he had brought them. Around 10 billion bully worth of bounties, 5 billion more than a Kanu, and all were collected within 3 weeks. It showed that Enel was not only capable of navigating through the sea unhindered, but also that the speed of his vessel was nothing to scoff at. His ship must have flown above all of the storms, which meant that he had been finding pirates using his observation haki constantly. This also meant that he was completely unaffected by the weather of the Grand Line, to the point where Enel might as well have been traveling one of the 4 regular seas. This was a huge blessing, as there had been reports of huge tsunamis wiping out both pirate crews and marine ships in the area where Enel had been active, which had also made Akainu return to base a bit earlier than expected. As I said, I'm not worried about him not escaping. I'm worried about the Big Mom pirates not letting this matter go and starting to attack nearby marine bases. That can't be helped really. Pirates will be pirates. Garp said as he scowled at the thought of so many Marines dying for such a stupid mistake. Indeed. And we are the Marines. If the Big Mom pirates insist on completely shifting the balance of the world, then we aren't scared to face them. It won't be pretty, but we must do our jobs regardless. Sengoku was placed in a rather uncomfortable position. He could only hope that Enel would be able to carry out the task without any issues. While the 2 old men were contemplating life, the halls of Marineford were rather lively, as Enel made his way there with a smile on his face. At least until he finally decided to acknowledge the people following him. Okay, so it's of my understanding that my mission is more akin to a punishment. So why exactly are you 2 following me? Enel said as he scratched the back of his head. Behind him trailed 2 people, one of them being Momonga, a marine vice admiral that somewhat admired Enel's achievements, and Hina, who was currently recently promoted to the rank of Commodore. I am merely here to make sure that your departure is smooth, and I also want to give you some advice regarding the Big Mom pirates, just to make sure that you are prepared for everything that might come your way. Momonga said as he crossed his arms. He was rather displeased that Enel had ignored him and Hina for the entire time they had been strolling the halls, but it couldn't really be helped as he had also not voiced his intentions. He was used to people with lower rankings at least saluting him. That was when he wanted to speak to Enel. But that never happened. He didn't want to appear forceful either, so he ended up awkwardly following the rear admiral around because he didn't really know what to do. That's nice, thanks Momonga. What about you, Hina? Enel asked with an odd smile on his face. He remembered Sengoku mentioning something about Hina being in his room, but was rather unwilling to bring up the subject with her directly. Hina wants to come with you. The pink-haired woman crossed her arms as a scowl rose to her face. She was rather displeased that Enel was being sent alone to deal with the Big Mom pirates. She knew Enel could take care of himself as well, but she also felt quite concerned for him. I'm afraid that isn't going to happen, Enel said as he tilted his head to the side a bit, looking at Momonga and Hina with a bit of appreciation. But Hina was about to protest, but Momonga stopped her. Commodore Hina, I understand that your friendship with Rear Admiral Enel is making you worry about him, but I assure you that Fleet Admiral Sengoku would never have sent Enel on this mission had he thought he would be unable to finish it properly. Momonga was extremely straightforward in his beliefs, and he didn't for once consider that Enel was going to have trouble returning from this mission. He was a fiercely loyal person. He didn't question Sengoku's decisions for one bit, and he also knew that Enel had shown enough merit to be promoted to Vice Admiral already. The only reason a promotion wasn't going to happen anytime soon was that Enel's addition to the Marines was rather sudden. He didn't have all of the training necessary to go any further than an honorary Rear Admiral rank. This was because he still had to go through a few classes to teach him how to lead his marine ship properly. Enel had been constantly postponing that though, as he didn't see any use in those classes. Momonga, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but the truth is that this mission is still plenty dangerous. Alone, nothing will be able to stop me from escaping, but I am unsure if I can protect someone else at the same time, Enel said as he shook his head a bit. Hina's mood instantly plummeted with those words. She disliked the thought that she would be somehow inconveniencing Enel in his mission. Both Momonga and Enel noticed her mood reaching rock bottom. The Vice Admiral simply took a few steps away awkwardly, not wanting to intrude on what he thought was likely something personal for the other two. Enel heaved a sigh in frustration as he wondered about how the people he was interacting with would react to his eventual betrayal. Hina, I know that you are strong, but I wouldn't say you are strong enough to face something like the Big Mom crew yet. Hina looked up at Enel with sadness in her gaze, but she couldn't exactly deny his words. She truly had no place in a conflict with pirates of that level. At least not as she was right now. You can take this time to train a bit, and you can join me in my next mission. How does that sound? Enel was quick to placate her, though he was well aware that this was likely going to be his last mission with the Marines. In a sense, he could have left already. He had gained training in armament hacking, and he had all of the manuals for the 6 powers. But he still wanted to be there for the war, and he felt like doing one last mission for the Marines. Enel was not an ungrateful person. Dealing with the Big Mom pirates would be his way of thanking the Marines for the help they had given him. Soon, the War of the Best will take place. I will take advantage of this journey and train constantly. I should have enough time to brush up on all of the 6 powers. After that, Hina simply nodded and said her goodbyes. She didn't stick around any longer, likely going right back to start training without Enel. I'm glad you were able to convince her, Rear Admiral Enel. Momonga had still not left though. Yeah, Enel said as he wondered how he was going to transport his prisoner. Sir Enel, if I may, the Big Mom pirates are a ruthless bunch, much like the majority of other pirates. If you can, I recommend simply dropping off Oven at the shore on one of their islands and retreating back to Marineford, Momonga said as he stroked his beard for a second. He knew that Enel was strong, and he was obviously confident in Sengoku's choice, but he also didn't want to see the new rising star of the Marines get hurt for no reason. I appreciate the advice, Momonga. I will likely take my leave in a few days' time. First, I need to collect some things that I requested from the base, then I will be able to transport the prisoner without any issues, Enel said as he nodded his head in appreciation. Very well, I wish you good luck, Enel. Since you are leaving soon, I will send proper descriptions of Big Mom's crew and their known abilities to your quarters. It's better to be prepared for anything. Momonga also nodded, and then he took his leave. Enel gave one last smile before his face returned to being neutral as he was left to his own devices. I can't wait for them to bring it over. Sea stone is a material that I didn't think I'd get my hands on anytime soon. I guess things are looking up. Chapter 33 Order and Departure. Point of view Enel. Well, a day of waiting for my order actually turned into 3, as I also have to wait for Oven to be in a stable condition to be carried around on a ship for a month or 2. It's a bit annoying, but I can't complain. There are still some things I can get done at Marineford. I also managed to spar with Garp once in the past 3 days. He was rather pleased with my progress with armament haki. Fighting Jack might have helped with that. He also looked at me like I'm some type of freak after seeing that I also could perform Rankyaku. It can't be helped, these techniques are easy for me since I can use my devil fruit to enhance my base speed. The best thing is that constantly enhancing my speed using my devil fruit makes me stronger too, as my body needs to be strong enough to handle that speed anyway. Well, this only works if I hit something, but still. Hina didn't really get in touch with me after I told her she can't come with me on this mission. She spent most of her time training after that and left yesterday to patrol the waters at the beginning of the Grand Line. Momonga was also really nice, sending the details of the most high-profile members of the Big Mom Pirates my way. It's a shame I already knew all of the details and even more. The Big Mom Pirates were a rather dangerous group in the series, and also one of the largest groups of antagonists that the protagonists had to face. I already have plenty of knowledge about most of them, their abilities and their respective styles of combat in some cases. I am a bit glad that Sengoku put me on this mission. The more time I spend at Marineford the worse I will feel later. I also spent just enough time to find out that I won't be able to get much information on the world government from the library I have access to. I only found out a bit more about the Gorozi, but that's about it really. The 5 elders, as some would call them, are technically the ruling authority of this world. That is what is being taught in the books that I found in Marineford's libraries. They are just a group of the highest-ranking celestial dragons, which doesn't tell me much, since celestial dragons are mostly bottom feeders. I am unsure if the 5 elders have any fighting strength themselves. Any book one found only spoke about political power, and I don't feel too comfortable asking Sengoku more about it. I tried to listen in on some conversations using my devil fruit and observation haki. I was able to learn some things from Sengoku's calls with other world government officials indirectly. After a bit of research and some testing, I discovered that I can spy on any conversation completely undetected as long as I don't reveal any intent towards the person I am spying on. Other experienced observations haki users can easily sense intent. I was able to test this on numerous occasions with Garp during training. Thankfully, hiding my emotions and not harboring intent is rather easy, as using observation haki requires one to keep his mind calm at all times anyway. I was able to find out a bit more about the political shifts in the 4 seas. The show was extremely centered on the Grand Line, but apparently, more and more kingdoms across the world are having revolts, and the people are getting less and less happy with their leaders. This is theorized to be the work of the Revolutionary Army. But I can't be too sure about that. It's easy for them to blame the Revolutionary Army for all of their problems, but it may just be that people are sick of their lies and of being mistreated by nobility. I can hear the 5 elders trying to order Sengoku around most of the time. They even told him to prevent a war with the Big Mom Pirates at all cost. I'm guessing they already have some foresight that the War of the Great will happen at this point. Ace hasn't even been captured yet, but it's likely that they were planning to kill Whitebeard ever since the old man was weakened by whatever disease he's having. Well, regardless of that, I already know that the 5 elders aren't even the actual rulers. The one that stands on the throne in Marijiwas is the one that these elders bow to. I was unable to find a single thing about him in either history books or books praising the world government. He should be the one actually pulling the strings. The 5 old men are just the figureheads, also likely older than they appear to be. Which says a lot since they are called elders. I know they are older because they had appeared in Robin's memories during the show, and they looked much the same as in the present. 20-something years later. There is also a rather simple explanation for this. Jewelry Bonnie, a pirate captain from the worst generation, she has the ability to age and de-age others at will. It's unknown how long she's been alive, but I know that she used to be a prisoner of the world government at some point. She also hates the Marines to the core. I remember that she is supposed to be getting captured sometime after the war when entering the New World. I need to prevent such a thing from happening. Her devil fruit is far too powerful. I'd rather the world government don't get their hands on it again. If I remember correctly, Blackbeard was the one to catch her. I guess that won't be happening. After all, I have quite a few plans for that pirate in particular. Still, I will be paying attention to her, just in case. I can't exactly go about kidnapping her, that wouldn't be quite right. But if things turn out to be similar to the original story, then I might arrange a permanent residence for her in the Sky Islands. Well, enough about that. There's no use in thinking about these things right now. Too many variables could come into play. My plan centers around my knowledge of the future, at least to a certain point. I need things to go normally for a while, so I need to get on and finish this mission. It's still hard to believe that Akainu made such a stupid mistake, but I guess he's not the type to easily accept the fact that Marines can't enforce their justice properly in today's climate. A single word from the world government is all it takes, and the Marines will be forced to drag their names through the mud. Sengoku likely knew from the beginning that the world government wouldn't want a war with the Big Mom pirates right now, so he started making decisions right away. I wonder if things will play out properly though. I should go to the port and collect my order. It didn't take me long to make my way to the docks, not exactly that large, marine effort. They left the crates out in the open, simply stamping some pieces of paper on them to signify that they were mine. Pretty subpar delivery service, but hey, they're here. No one would steal the property of a rear admiral anyway. Unless they're pirates, but you won't really find any in Marineford besides special prisoners. These crates hold quite a few metals. Well, 3 metals, there are only 3 crates anyway. One crate is filled to the brim with white gold. Extremely expensive, but I brought in a lot of bounties, so it wasn't really an issue. White gold has enough conductivity to the point where I can use it like my regular gold, even somewhat better as its melting point is slightly lower. But as a metal, it is also tougher than silver, which is the metal with the highest conductivity that I could find. One of the other boxes has something else entirely, that is, bars of tungsten, the toughest metal that could be found back on Earth. Apparently, it's still a rather difficult metal to find in this world, but still extremely tough. Now, unlike gold, this metal has around 4 times less conductivity, but if I can mix and match this in my white gold, I should be able to make a staff good enough for me to use efficiently. A staff made out of tungsten and white gold will be extremely tough, a lot harder to break apart than my regular golden one. But this isn't really it, at least not yet. The third and very last box. Sea stone. Mythical material, barely understood, copies the effects of the sea from what I was able to read about it. The only person that understands a bit more about it would be Dr. Vegapunk, a former member of the MADS, a group of an illegal research group that I only know a few members of from the series, of course. It's difficult to handle and extremely tough. Its conductivity is almost non-existent as it is an actual stone, not a metal. It's a special stone and its conductivity should be even lower. However, I don't need to manipulate it like a metal. To be specific, I only ordered sea stone dust, ground properly by Vegapunk's machinations. I will use this sea stone and spread it within my staff, keeping it away only from the parts that I touch. Since I control all other components of the staff, it will just get some getting used to, then I will be able to disable most devil fruit users by simply catching them with my staff. The final product should weigh around 6 to 7 tons. That's about what I expect. I became a lot stronger after learning armament and getting beaten up by Garp on a daily basis, so I should be able to handle this weight. The staff wasn't hard to make, it's a bit less malleable than the golden one, but it's still acceptable enough. Now, I want to keep my ship made out of gold, as I don't feel like just throwing away a good few tons of gold. So I will just compress my former staff into a permanent pair of gauntlets. It's better than throwing away what is essentially heavier money. Having all of this weight on me will make movement a bit more strained for a while, but I can just take it as training. I'll get used to it in a week or 2. Now, it's time to visit the prisoner and start taking him home. Chapter 34, Charlotte Oven. Point of view narration. Oven didn't quite like the situation he found himself in. He had just decided to go out and travel a bit, wanting to garner some favor from his mother by bringing her some exotic sweets. What he didn't expect was to run into Akainu, the most brutal of all admirals. He tried to fight back, but Akainu burnt off his entire left arm and half of right leg in the process, which only made things worse. Oven also received a heavy strike to the torso, which had almost killed him if it weren't for the doctors at Marineford. He was pleased to learn that he was going to be taken back home. He knew that his family was likely going to come looking for him anyway. He wasn't stupid enough to not see that the Marines wanted to avoid a war. What pleased him the most was the fact that, apparently, a measly rear admiral was going to be the one to take him home. He laughed out loud at that, thinking with glee of how his family would likely torture the Marine for a few days. The world government would also never let the Marines start a war over some rear admiral, so Oven saw this as a chance to get some semblance of revenge. Not that he could do it himself. He was bound by sea stone shackles, his only arm had its wrist tied to his neck, and he also had a leg bracer made out of sea stone, with a heavy steel ball chain to it. Oven hoped to be able to get home. And hopefully either find someone able to heal him or find some prosthetics with the help of his family. He was placed in a holding cell while his wounds were still being looked after. He knew that he was going to have to resist at least another month or two in captivity before being returned to his crew. The shame he felt was great, and he knew that he wouldn't receive that warm a welcome when being delivered to his home. What he didn't expect was a tall man with large earlobes to just stroll into his cell while humming. The blonde man was wearing a formal suit. His accessories were all golden, including a set of ornate gauntlets that made Oven squint his eyes a little bit. The staff he was carrying was a bit more interesting though. It seemed to be made out of a strange material, or a mix of materials. It seemed to be pure white in some parts, mixed with gray in others. It was an odd color scheme. The last thing Oven noticed was the marine coat flowing behind the tall man, which made the pirate realize that he was staring at a rear admiral. A rather high position within the Marines, and also most likely the person that was tasked with taking him home. It was also now that he noticed the backpack that Enel was carrying, likely with supplies for the journey. You took your time coming here," Oven said as he looked at Enel with a mocking smile. "Not like you could walk to me anyway," Enel said with a smile of his own, not bothering to give the prisoner much courtesy. The pirate growled a bit at that, scowling while thinking about the audacity of the rear admiral in front of him. What a prideful dog. Let's get going. I don't have all year to waste on you and your little family." Enel tapped the bars of the holding cell, heating them up and bending them out of his way as he walked towards Oven. The pirate was somewhat shocked when seeing Enel's ability. It made him think that Enel had a devil fruit somewhat similar to his, but he couldn't guess what it actually was. Enel simply grabbed the heavy ball that was tied to Oven's ankle, heating it up and turning it into a handle. He then proceeded to start dragging the pirate out like a rag doll, not really bothering about his safety or listening to screams of protest. Most of the Marines that witnessed Enel dragging the prisoner to the docks were either terrified or amused, with Enel just casually humming while Oven swore at him constantly. It was an odd sight, a large and intimidating pirate being dragged around by someone almost twice as small as he was. The two of them reached the docks, at which point Enel let go of Oven's chain, allowing the pirate to finally stand up on his one leg. "You fucking scum. My family will murder you for this. Do you think this is a Joe minus?" Enel chose to shut him up with a slap. The slap sent Oven tumbling to the ground, almost making him fall into the sea. "You are a pirate. You are in no position to speak to me using any kind of tone. From now on, you only talk when asked, or I will deliver you to your family in pieces. Understood?" Enel looked at Oven with a cold gaze. The old archaeologist didn't take all that kindly to insults, and pirates were all criminals to him anyway. He wasn't about to let a random criminal insult him so brazenly. Oven, even with all of his pride, couldn't help but gulp a bit and nod when seeing Enel's cold gaze. What the fuck is this Marine? It was at this point that he reminded himself that the Marines were a world superpower for a reason, and not only the admirals were powerful in their faction. But he was still too prideful to accept the fact that some random rear admiral could order him around. Still, he decided to stop talking in order to not get hit any more than necessary, as he could tell that Enel was likely not joking. Enel clapped his hands, washing away that cold look with a smile on his face as his gauntlets started departing from his hands and forming a ship. This time the ship had two seats, one was more akin to a throne, while the other was just a stool. "Get on," Enel simply said as he ignored the startled gaze Oven gave him. The pirate proceeded to do as Enel said, sitting down on that stool as he looked at the ship a bit confused. Shouldn't the ship be in water for minus his words were cut off when the ship immediately took to the skies, Enel supplying its motors with enough energy to take off almost instantly. The scene made Oven eat his own words as he saw the ground get further and further away as he and Enel approached the clouds at impressive speeds. Enel placed his backpack near the throne and looked at the sky with a relaxed gaze. Now, I'll make this simple for you. You can either help me train or do nothing for the following month. What do you say? Enel's words were beyond anything that the pirate had been expecting. What? Oven asked with a confused tone. How can I even help with training? I don't even have a full set of limbs. He thought to himself as he looked at Enel in confusion. I'll remove your shackles, your only task is to try and hit me. I will try to dodge out of the way without actually moving from my position at all. Simple enough, right? Enel's smile was radiant at this point as his ship had also already reached above the clouds. Sure. Oven said with a sadistic smile of his own. This is my chance. I won't be shamefully delivered to my family after all. Chapter 35 Temporary Training Partner. Point of view narration. The sadistic smile didn't last long though as Charlotte Oven looked down at the clouds below him with a frustrated gaze. If I kill him now, how do I get down alive? I don't even know how he steers this stupid ship. The prideful member of the Big Mom Pirates didn't even stop to consider that he wouldn't be able to handle fighting the rear admiral tasked with steering him home. I could likely steer this ship to the closest island if we were on the sea, but I'm not even sure if this stupid thing can float on water. Enel looked at his prisoner with a calm smile. I know you're thinking about the logistics of killing me right now. Enel said as he squinted his eyes a bit and crossed his legs. I'll let you know, even if you try. As you are now, you won't be able to even make me get up from my chair. Enel didn't even bother judging Oven's reaction as he took out a map from a bag and started looking over it. Oven himself sweated a bit as he thought about Enel's words. He didn't know if he could take on a rear admiral as he was currently, still he didn't expect that much confidence from Enel. No reason to get all scared now. But damn, Akainu really did do a number on you. Enel said as he slowly sat up, this time Oven calmed down, knowing that Enel wouldn't kill him due to his mission at the very least. Oven couldn't really protest, looking down to see his missing limbs. Maybe he truly wouldn't be able to do much in his current state. I don't get it. Why ask me to help you train anyway? Oven said as he snorted a bit. He wasn't precisely against some light physical activity, especially since he was going to be alone with Enel for quite a while and he needed to somehow check how weakened he was after his capture. The rear admiral also seemed a lot more agreeable than Akainu was. The admiral had been extremely brutal, both before and after he had caught Oven. Although Oven didn't like Enel due to his previous actions, he could at least appreciate that he wasn't put in an uncomfortably small cage that was laced with sea stone. Listen, I don't care much for pirates. I detest most of them, honestly. But that doesn't mean I can't look over that and take advantage of a pirate if need be. Enel said as he nodded his head in a sage-like manner. Hearing Enel's answer made Oven raise an eyebrow at him. Maybe Enel wasn't that much better than Akainu after all. Hey, I appreciate the thought, but now that I think about it, did you even grab the keys for my cuffs? Oven asked as he looked down at his cuffs. Why would I ever need that? Enel said as a golden tendril rose from the ship. It seemed to enter into the locks of the restraints that held Oven's power at bay. The tendril then twisted all of the locks at once, opening them up instantly. The sea stone fell, hitting the golden deck of the small ship they were on. This world really needs to work on more secure locks. Enel thought to himself as he frowned at how simple the lock was. He was an archaeologist in his past life, but he also dabbled a bit in lockpicking, so he knew how the most difficult locks could take even hours to pick at times. He didn't really pick the lock this time, he technically just created a golden key, but he could feel the simplicity of the lock mechanism regardless of that. You'd think they would make their cuffs harder to pick open. They use these types of things on the lower levels of Impel Down. Imagine if the lock-picking lawyer walked in and decided that he wanted to make some new friends. Oven flexed his arm a bit as he stretched, sighing in relief as he felt more power returning to his body. Feels a lot better this way. The prideful pirate was brought to this point already. He didn't feel the need to mince words, and he no longer cared for posturizing. I bet you won't be putting them back on, by the way. They're pretty useless, all things considered. Enel said as he started clipping his nails randomly. Thank you. Oven said as he smiled honestly for a bit. He hadn't expected Enel to be that accommodating. Don't thank me. By the way, one wrong move and you will be hanging from the bottom of the ship by a sea stone chain. Enel said. He wasn't going out of his way to be friendly, Oven was really the last thing he was worried about currently. Oven's smile became strained for a bit as he let off a tenure of slurs in his mind. He kept all complaints to himself though, preferring not to test Enel's patience and understanding. Let's start training now. I want to take advantage of every minute of this journey. Enel stopped whatever he was doing and stood up. Oven was about to comment that the ship was a bit small for training, then it started to fit right underneath them. It went from being the size of a small boat to begin the size of a small training room. A square platform with wings and propellers, basically. Oven was a bit impressed by the way Enel was manipulating the metals around them and by the ease with which he could keep them in the air despite those shifts. The pirate could feel the ship slow down a bit, which made him raise an eyebrow. Slowing down a bit to keep our stability, we aren't as aerodynamic anymore, so this is necessary. Shouldn't get in the way of the timeline though. We should get to Cake Island in approximately a month. Enel said as he prepared for the training, casually taking off his suit, leaving his upper body bare. Sometimes he trained in his original clothing, the one that the old Enel wore, but he didn't feel like fully getting changed in front of Oven. Oven nodded, as he also wobbly stood up. He barely had any balance, as he was missing the lower part of one of his legs. Enel frowned a bit. With a sigh, he tapped the ship with his staff, and a golden peg leg formed and supported Oven without any issue. The upper part connected itself with Oven's leg with two metal tendrils that twirled around all the way around his knee, making it look like a modern prosthetic. Oven's eyes widened at that. Thanks. This time, his tone was completely honest. He may have looked down on the Marines, but he was not an ungrateful person. With that, Oven decided that he would at least ask his siblings to not outright kill Enel. You would be relatively useless without a peg leg. Stop thanking me for nothing. Also, get to work, don't stop unless I ask you to. Enel said as he rubbed the bridge of his nose in frustration. Oven looked at Enel pointedly, then, with a sigh, he decided to start. With a sadistic smile, he dashed toward the Marine, his fist cocked back and ready to crush Enel. Enel didn't move one step, simply trying to bend his body out of the way. Right now, he wanted to train 2 of the 6 powers, and gain some insight into Kicken. The first strike was easy to evade as Enel simply allowed his body to tilt to the side. But the second one became much harder as Oven delivered a straight right towards Enel's gut. Enel frowned a bit as he realized that he wouldn't be able to dodge that one, so he instantly hardened his muscles as hard as he could without using hockey. Garp had told Enel of this training method. It was to gain mastery in both Tech-I and Kami-E, dodge any attack that you can, those that you can't use your body to block. Oven punched Enel in the gut with considerable strength, making Enel gasp a bit as some spit came out of his mouth. Oven stopped at that point and asked need a break. He didn't know how to pilot the ship they were on, and at this point, he realized that it was likely only flying due to Enel's devil fruit. So he didn't want Enel to pass out by any means, as that would mean his death as well. What? Why did you stop? Do I look like I've moved from this spot? Enel looked angry at the mere suggestion of resting so early. Oven was a bit shocked by that. Looking down, he noticed that Enel had indeed not moved at all from his original location. Oven's eyes widened a bit. He had hit Enel with a lot of strength. He was still acclimating with his missing arm, so his balance and weight distribution could be improved, but that punch was still close to 70 to 80% of his full power. This is going to be a long month. Oven thought to himself as he felt less and less excited about the sparring partner situation he found himself in. Chapter 36, Food Problem Solved. Point of view narration. Oven lay on the ground. He was heaving for air as he tried his best to comprehend what had been happening. 3 days, that was how long Enel had lasted to move from that place. Even now, after many hits, and Enel's body being bruised all over, all Oven had done was to make him take a step backwards. That was it. Oven was exhausted beyond anything else. His injuries somewhat affected his stamina, and he still wasn't in the best of shape. Oven could now at the very least correct his posture, and he had gotten used to the strange balance that his body had now that he was missing an arm. The peg leg that Enel had given him was also already making up for his lost leg. The only problem was that it was rather easy to bend. Enel did tell him eventually that gold wasn't a horribly strong metal. The rear admiral ended up repairing it for him in an instant, which the pirate appreciated. Still, missing limbs did make him feel quite discouraged. It was as if he had to get used to an entirely new body. Oven didn't really blame it on the rear admiral. It was just a bit odd, not being able to feel parts of his body that he once could. Oven could only inwardly curse his stamina and weakened body, as he was now the one sprawled on the ground, and Enel was still standing, casually walking around and bandaging himself. We should probably eat now, Enel said as he flexed his arms a bit. What? Eat what? That backpack of yours won't have anywhere near enough food for the two of us even for one sitting, Oven said as he raised an eyebrow. Enel had not taken many supplies, he had basically started sailing spontaneously, only getting his new weapon and bringing a small backpack with some books, a journal, a map, and very few supplies. He also had a few eternal poses, one was for Marineford, and one was for Cake Island, the main stronghold of the Big Mom pirates. Don't be such a pansy. We can always fish a sea king and get enough food to last us the rest of our lives, Enel said as he finished bandaging his body. His entire abdomen was now bandaged up. Oven had given him a few injuries, but nothing too major, most of them were bound to heal in a few days. Oven sulked a bit as he murmured some slurs. It was hard for such a prideful pirate to accept Enel's casual demeanor and remarks. Still, training with Enel had managed to humble him slightly, making him realize that Enel could basically stand in a place for 3 days and Oven wouldn't be able to defeat him in any way. Sure, he had yet to use his devil fruit, but he wasn't about to try and kill Enel. He knew that would also likely mean suicide. It wasn't like he was a fishman and that he could survive underwater until one of his family members followed his vivre card. So we're just hoping for a sea king to appear, Oven said as he rubbed his stomach a bit. Another reason for his tiredness was definitely the lack of nutrition. He wasn't exactly fed anything great during his stay as a prisoner in Marineford. Now we're going for the calm belt. We are already relatively close to it, I'll just get us close to the water and some curious sea creature is bound to pop its head out, Enel said as he started lowering the ship through the clouds below them. Thankfully, there wasn't any storm. Well, thankfully for Oven, Enel would have been just fine either way. Not like storms were all that common near the calm belt. It was called the calm belt for a good reason. Enel was quick to spread out his observation haki as far as he could. He sensed it, all of the life forms hidden in the depths. He could sense them shifting around as they also likely felt his intrusive presence. Out of the waters rose a snake, a sea king. It was tall and long, thick and powerful. Its fangs bared at the golden ship that was hovering in place at a low altitude. Oven trembled a bit, knowing that he wouldn't be able to do much without falling off of the ship. He could only hope that Enel had some type of plan. It dove out of the water at surprising speeds, its maw instantly opened, and it was large enough to swallow the ship in a single bite. And it tried, oh it tried. Oven's eyes widened at that. Cold sweat filled his back as he saw the rows of teeth that threatened to eat him as well as the ship he was on, whole. Enel didn't bother dodging the attack, he didn't panic, nor was he surprised. To him, the snake moved so slow that it was pitiful. He simply pointed his white-grayish staff towards the quickly approaching snake. Like a river, a torrent of tendrils sprouted from the staff, dwarfing the giant snake in both size and speed. The snake realized that it was being attacked, but it was far too late to dodge, so it hoped for the best and forged forwards. The tendrils were merciless, their sturdiness almost unmatched as they pierced through the snake's head in countless places and pushed it back towards the sea. From the sea, it looked like a golden cloud was releasing a storm of blades, a deadly rain that threatened to kill anything in its wake, all towards the sea creature that was unfortunate enough to approach Enel's ship first. The lifeless body of the Sea King reached the sea, waves rising in its wake as it was slowly starting to sink. See? That was easy, Enel said as he quickly steered his ship towards the corpse of the Sea King. Golden tendrils expanded from the ship and quickly started collecting large chunks of meat out of the cadaver. Oven gulped a bit, both out of glee that their food was secured and out of fear. Would I survive something like that? The attack wasn't just terrifying, it was also terrifyingly fast. It had taken less than a second from the snake jumping towards the ship, to it being riddled with holes. Any notion of even attempting to escape or fight Enel once they reached an island vanished from Oven's mind at that moment. We'll only be taking around a ton or two of meat. I don't want our speed to be affected by this, Enel said as he created something akin to a golden net at the bottom of the ship that held the meat he had collected. I understand. But how are we cooking it exactly? Oven asked while slowly getting up from the golden floor he was laying on. Oh, that's your job? Oven snapped his head at Enel when hearing that. Enel just tilted his head when seeing that. What? Your name is Oven, and you have a devil fruit very well suited for this. For the rest of this journey, you are this ship's designated cook, Enel said as he clapped his hands with a friendly smile. Oven just looked at the ground in exasperation. This is going to be a long month. Chapter 37, Dressrosa and Change of Plans. Point of view Enel. Training with Oven has been rather nice. He makes for an adequate sparring partner. Honestly, if I tried this type of training with Garp, he would have most likely killed me by mistake. At least I can take plenty of hits from Oven. With each punch, I feel my body more and more prepared for the next. With each hit, I feel less and less pain. Endurance is something necessary in this world. I need a lot of it if I want to not get downed by one hit from someone like Kato. Oven is very far from a Yonko, hell, his physical strength is even lesser than that gorilla pirate captain from a few weeks back. But I'll take what I can get. Currently, I don't feel like I've made much progress with Kamii, but I think my body has been becoming stronger and stronger thanks to this training, so I can't complain. It's only been a few days anyway, I can't possibly master all of the 6 powers this fast. Oven did get tired a bit quickly though. Maybe I jumped into this training a bit too soon, but I figured he'd heal a lot faster if he wasn't being constantly weakened by sea stone. I don't care about him wearing cuffs or not, neither him nor anyone in his family is a real threat to me. Only Katekuri is a bit more dangerous thanks to his observation haki. Big Mom is just a big target that is also relatively slow. Her special moves also mostly rely on her Sun and Cloud Souls, which are completely useless against me. Funny how she calls one of her attacks God of Lightning. Tenjin, I do hope she tries to use it on me, so I can at least get a good laugh while on their island. She should be a bit more resilient than Jack though. If a fight is to break out, I expect her to tank at least 10 hits. Her haki is a lot stronger. She should also have Conquerors, which makes her even stronger. Katekuri won't be as resilient as Jack even. I expect him to be able to somewhat evade most attacks though. He will be the most annoying, but as long as I can disturb his serenity, he won't be able to use Future Sight much. I don't know a lot about the other cadres of the Big Mom Pirates, nothing besides the fact that they aren't of any concern to me. I doubt they'll take this too far though. I've been somewhat placating Oven. He should be able to somewhat calm down his family and hopefully prevent an all-out war. I can't exactly befriend the Whitebeard pirates if they don't participate in the War of the Best. Well, I can, but it will be a lot more annoying and difficult to gain their trust. This way, I will be able to both gain their trust and forge a tight enough relationship that I would be able to call on them for help later on when the world government realizes that I am a bigger threat than just a random bloke with a powerful devil fruit. I have no idea how many trump cards the government can deploy. With powerful allies, they will also be extremely reluctant to act. And by the time they realize the importance of the situation, the history of the world will already be out in the open. Big news, Morgan. I need to get in touch with him immediately after the war to form an alliance. I will be able to also give him a lot of spicy information about the world and some events, as I know quite a bit about this world. I also can listen in on conversations on any island I visit. Rumors will reach me first before any type of network that he can set up. Cake Island will be a pretty interesting place to gather information. The main base of a Yonko, plenty of conversations to listen into on that island. I plan to stay there for a few weeks too. Training on a ship is quite tiring, so taking a break there won't be that bad. I also get the chance to know the Big Mom Pirates a bit better, even if their leader is a stupid slob. If I can befriend someone like Katekuri, the situation would be worth it. Oven himself is a bit of an arrogant prick, but he's mellowed out quite a lot. Guess losing half of his limbs did have some type of effect on his psyche. He seems pretty agreeable, but he also fears me quite a bit. It might just be that he doesn't want to antagonize me and risk any new injuries. He should be able to tell that he's not a big threat to me from the earlier display with that Sea King. Even without using my devil fruit fully, I should be able to fill him with enough holes to turn him into a net. Even so, we are soon reaching our first stop. We aren't exactly going to travel to Cake Island in a straight line. I don't want to just eat fried unseasoned meat for an entire week. Now, the first stop is a bit peculiar. It's a place that I've been meaning to check up on for a while. Dressrosa. Controlled by none other than Donquixote Doflamingo. A little rat that I have a bit of a debt to repay to. I was obviously able to listen in on the conversations on Jack's ship before I got close to them and started killing everyone. Good old Heavenly Yakasha put a bounty on my head. I am sure I will find some pirates trying to collect it on this journey, but I doubt anyone of note will rear his head. I don't want to kill Doflamingo yet, but I do feel like giving him a small present. Currently, only his people are in the royal castle, as he threw out the royal family and enslaved them. I will probably make a nice storm strike them a bit. Nothing major, just a bit of property damage and maybe 1 or 2 deaths for messing with me. Well, better keep on going. Point of view narration. Enel and Oven traveled and trained for around 5 more days before Dressrosa was in their sights. Oven wasn't expecting to stop at the island so quickly, but he did agree with Enel's reasoning about needing some spices for their food. The pirate didn't really care about escaping at this point, as he was heading for his family anyway, and Enel didn't exactly make him feel like he was a prisoner or anything. The sea stone cuffs were absorbed into the ship at some point, Enel saying that he'd be able to use the materials at some point. Oven obviously didn't complain. It was a rather great turn of events for him. No cages, no cuffs. This wasn't a usual marine escorting prisoner situation. This was more of a regular trip than anything. Oven didn't even mind cooking. He was already relatively skilled in doing it, and Enel wasn't treating him badly anyway. Enel could tell that Oven had warmed up to him rather easily. Ah, the astounding effects of Stockholm Syndrome. Wait, that doesn't sound right. If he looks at me weirdly, I will kill him. The two of them reached the docks in Dressrosa without any issue, both of them gaining quite a few looks as they descended from the sky in their golden boat. Enel also put his suit and rear admiral coat back on as he wasn't about to start training in Dressrosa. They jumped down from the ship without any issue. Oven didn't even lose his balance, having already fully gotten used to his peg leg. Enel touched the ship with both of his hands, as he compressed the gold and turned it into his usual spiked gauntlets. He handed his backpack to Oven. The pirate just nodded and put it on his shoulder. Oven. I'll rely on you to collect the necessary spices. I am not the best chef, so I'll trust you on this. Also, buy yourself some clothes if you find anything nice, you're bound to need a change at some point. Enel said as he waved his hand at Oven. Sure thing, Enel. Meet you back here in about 6 hours. Oven asked, trying to establish some sort of return so that they didn't waste time finding each other. He didn't bother asking Enel what he was planning to do, as he knew that the marine likely had some business on the island. You can come by any time, don't worry, I'll know if you get here. Enel said as he simply started flying away using Jeppo. Oven sweated a bit when noticing what Enel had implied. Observation hacky spread out this widely? Why am I even surprised at this point? Enel stepped on air as he reached the middle of the island. He was quick to check the situation inside the castle, curious about how his good friend, Doflamingo, was doing. The scene he witnessed, however, managed to turn his plans around a bit. Doflamingo was dragging a woman by the hair, carrying her towards what Enel assumed were his chambers. Enel recognized the woman as well, a relatively tall and voluptuous lady, wearing a white dress with red dots. She had disheveled dark violet hair and her face held a look of defiance, but her eyes were filled with indignation and frustration. The woman was none other than Viola, the crown princess of Dressrosa. Enel wasn't a hero. He didn't plan to rescue the people of Dressrosa. That was because he had a mission, and he knew that they would eventually be saved regardless of what he did. He had planned to destroy the palace a bit and kill a few crew members. But seeing that scene made the rage inside him boil. If I ignore something like this when I have all the power to stop it, can I really call myself a man? Chapter 38, A Warlord's Crimes. Point of view narration. Doflamingo was pissed to the point where he couldn't even find it within himself to calm down. He had lost all contact with the mammoth and Jack the Draft. He wasn't stupid enough to not notice what had likely happened. They were all dead. That blasted rear admiral had somehow managed to kill them all, not even leaving a trace of their bodies or the ship anywhere on the sea. The beast pirates quickly started contacting him, as they all knew that Jack had been pursuing a bounty he put on someone before he had vanished. So, Doflamingo was now stuck trying to placate the beast pirates, as they now partly blamed him for Jack's death. It was a stretch for them to blame him, but he knew that the beast pirates didn't give a shit if it was him or someone else that had killed Jack. They wanted blood because one of their core members was killed. Doflamingo had to pay a huge price to calm them down, one that was bound to put him behind a few years on his plans. And that made him angry. Beyond anything that he had been before. He had just ended the call with Queen, another one of the 3 stars of the beast pirates. He and Queen had established the tack so that Doflamingo wasn't going to be attacked by the beast pirates and have his entire operation ruined. Doflamingo even cracked his glasses in anger and he broke the throne inside his palace. Well, it was the palace of the Dressrosa royal family, But it was being ruled by him now, so he didn't care. Now, the former celestial dragon needed to blow off some steam. And unfortunately for her, Viola had walked into the room at the worst time possible. Doflamingo didn't waste any time grabbing her hand and dragging her towards his chambers. The woman somehow managed to break free, shouting in indignation. But the warlord got even angrier, slapping her once, sending her to the floor, then grabbing her by the hair and dragging her anyway. Viola shouted and struggled, some strands of her hair were being ripped out as Doflamingo dragged her across the floor. Her long heels had been lost somewhere along the way, as she struggled with tears in her eyes. Many times, she cried herself to sleep. She had lost her father, her older sister. Even her young niece was forced to be a gladiator in the arena to placate Doflamingo's boredom. Deep down, she was hoping for someone to come, for something to happen, and for the man that had ruined her family to finally meet his end. But she knew. No one was there to help her, she knew nothing would save her. It wasn't the first time Doflamingo was going to get away with taking advantage of her. At least that's what she thought. Wow. What an odd courting method. Doflamingo stopped in his tracks as cold sweat filled his back. In front of the warlord, the figure of a tall man appeared, swaying slightly as a marine coat flowed behind him. His long earlobes also swayed from side to side as he used a grayish staff like a walking stick. His hands were adorned by a set of golden gauntlets. Doflamingo grit his teeth in anger when seeing him. He could recognize that look anywhere in the world. The main cause of all of his recent setbacks and problems. Enel. Doflamingo said as he reflexively let go of Viola's hair. The woman finally was able to look freely at the person that had arrived in the room. Her eyes widened with joy when she noticed that he was a marine. But a wave of disappointment soon washed over her when noticing that he was a rear admiral. She knew that at least an admiral was necessary to take someone like Doflamingo down. Maybe he can call for backup. I can't lose hope now, maybe he can help us. She reasoned in her mind as she was about to open her mouth and ask him for help. But Doflamingo's stare made her close her mouth shut as she looked at the ground in fear. A person that could help her was here, but she was fearing for her life. There was no way a rear admiral will be able to protect me from high minus. Viola didn't even get to finish her thought as she felt a coat around her shoulders. Her eyes widened as she hadn't even seen Enel move. Yet he was at her side and Doflamingo was currently a bit further away. The warlord had felt a chill on his spine. Doflamingo jumped away thinking that Enel was attacking him with his staff again, only to see the marine completely ignore him and put his coat around Viola, a princess of Dressrosa. You seem to be shivering a bit. Are you cold? Enel asked with a relaxed smile on his face. Viola quickly blushed at the sight. She then decided to check something. She used her devil fruit, the power that allowed her to be called an insight human, to study Enel for a second, and her eyes widened at what she saw. This man. He is strong. She had never seen someone with that much power hidden within them. Enel was by far the strongest man she had laid her eyes upon. At least, he was capable of the most destruction. If she was to put it into perspective, then Doflamingo was a small star that showed itself at night, and Enel was more akin to the sun, completely outshining him in every aspect. The best part was something else though. Within Enel she could feel a drive, a determination so powerful that it completely outshined Doflamingo's. His mind was also completely empty of any perverse thoughts, despite her disheveled appearance. She gulped a bit as a smile was making its way to her lips. She felt a familiar emotion coming from him. Rage, a rage so grand that it made her shiver a bit. It was akin to a boiling sea of lava. And she could tell that all of it was directed at Doflamingo. And there was no speck of fear, not even the slightest inkling of uncertainty. That confidence managed to get a rise out of her as she started feeling something that she hadn't in a very long time. A strange sense of affection. Enel's mind was a complicated one, that much was plain to tell. But Viola also realized that there was another issue with this situation. Doflamingo is a warlord. Can he even be apprehended by the Marines? The thought made her a bit disheartened, but feeling Enel's rage and confidence made her believe that he'd at least protect her. And maybe he'd also take her family away from the clutches of that mad warlord. That would at least give them time to recuperate and hopefully take down Doflamingo eventually. What is the meaning of this, Rear Admiral Enel? I was just about to have some fun with one of my subordinates. I don't see how this is of any concern to you. Doflamingo decided to address Enel formally, knowing that he had the upper hand in the situation due to his status. Enel didn't say anything, only letting out a small smile. But Viola could tell that the smile was merely a way for him to express his rage. It was nothing more than a misleading visage. Subordinate, you say? Is that right? Enel didn't bother listening to Doflamingo. Instead, he looked at Viola, who was currently still sitting on the ground with his coat around her. She clutched the coat as she covered herself with it, hiding her smile underneath it for a second. Doflamingo was angered by the fact that Enel ignored him, but he was still cautious. He already knew that Enel had a huge advantage in speed and that observation hockey was also most likely his specialty. I'm not a pirate, Viola said as she slowly started standing up, making Doflamingo grit his teeth in anger. Enel could hear them crack at this point. I am Viola, the second daughter of the Riku family and one of the princesses of Dressrosa. She stood up proudly, finally being able to speak out freely in front of the man that had oppressed her for so long. Enel smiled at that. This time his smile was genuine, as he could feel Viola's confidence in him. He knew of her devil fruit powers, so he also knew that she could likely tell how powerful he was. Well, that addresses that, Enel said as he started slowly spinning his staff. Doflamingo scoffed at that. So what if she is a princess? Her royal family doesn't do anything for the Marines. Your superiors would never agree to this. They were dethroned 8 years ago and everyone on this island hates them. He was quick to try and use his position again. Problem is, he didn't really know the Marines as well as he thought he did. Really now? Well, I better ask for their opinion then. Enel took a small transponder snail out of his pocket. He rang Sengoku's snail directly. Doflamingo's eyes narrowed into slits as he quickly dashed towards Enel. He wasn't stupid enough to let Enel inform the Marines of his crimes. But his agitated state of mind didn't allow him to sense Enel's next movement. A blackened staff hit him in the torso and sent him flying through the palace walls at breakneck speeds. Enel had only hit him half-heartedly, using only one arm as the other was still ringing Sengoku. But he had applied haki to his weapon, something that he had managed to do for the first time on his way to Dressrosa. Viola's hair and the coat she was now wearing both flowed violently from the shockwave of that hit. Her eyes widened as she saw that exchange happen, while she only saw the aftermath as she couldn't even catch Enel's staff moving, and Doflamingo was seemingly sent flying by a violent gust of wind. The princess was about to say something, but then she heard another voice. Sengoku's office, who is it? Someone had finally picked up the transponder snail as Enel smiled a bit. Greetings. Rear Admiral Enel here. I've run into a bit of a situation here in Dressrosa, Enel said as he twired one of his earlobes. His observation was spread all across the island. He could feel Doflamingo's forces all gathering towards the palace due to the commotion, and Doflamingo himself seemed to be staring at the sky in confusion a few hundred meters away from the palace. Enel. This is Akainu. Glad that you are reporting from time to time, finally taking your duties as a Marine seriously, I see. Akainu had just happened to be in Sengoku's office when Enel called. Sengoku himself was off to somewhere else, training in the courtyard with Garp most likely. Admiral Akainu answered as he knew that only important matters were told to Sengoku, the type that were usually extremely urgent, so he just responded directly. As an admiral he could at least deal with some matters in Sengoku's absence. He also still didn't like Enel, but he also couldn't help but respect the Rear Admiral's willingness to face the Big Mom pirates by himself. No one would have forced him to go on that mission if he had just refused it, yet he did it anyway. That much warranted some amount of respect even from someone like Akainu. Indeed. This is a rather serious matter, Admiral Akainu, Enel said as he could feel Doflamingo slowly getting up from the rubble, clutching his side as his subordinates all ran to support him. Alarms rang throughout the city as soon as the palace walls fell. Viola's eyes widened again as she realized that Enel was indeed speaking to an admiral. At this point, she was starting to hope that Enel would be able to do more than save some members of her family. Maybe he truly was capable of bringing Doflamingo down. Akainu immediately noticed the seriousness in Enel's voice. This was the first time Enel had addressed him with his title while speaking in such a serious tone. Warlord Doflamingo has enslaved the former royal family of Dressrosa. I was able to catch him in the act, attacking one of the royalty. As a Rear Admiral of the Marines, I ask for you, Admiral Akainu, to expel Doflamingo from the warlords. But regardless of that, he won't be alive to see today's sunset, Enel said with a blank gaze. He turned his head to the side, feeling that Doflamingo was already making his way back to the palace with an angry scowl on his face. At this point, Viola was almost bursting with joy as she could feel the rage inside Enel rise when he said that last part. Enel. The rear admiral smiled a bit when hearing that voice. From the other side of the transponder snell, Enel could clearly hear the noise of Akanu's teeth clenching, almost cracking in anger and magma bubbling. You are allowed to act. I will deal with any backlash that may come out of this. Akanu was actually boiling with rage as well, and Enel could feel it. I won't make it there in time, that scum will definitely try to run. It's up to you to dispense justice upon him. With that, Akanu hung up as the admiral shouted for Sengoku with an angry tone. Enel didn't say anything, he simply turned around to Viola, who was looking at him with starry eyes at this point. He simply handed her his snail, placing it gently in her palm with a smile spread on his lips. I'll be back in a bit. Princess Viola. Enel took a small bow and completely disappeared from the room, leaving only the eldest living princess of the Dressrosa kingdom in that room with happy tears flowing from her eyes. Chapter 39, Responsibility and Absolute Justice. Point of view narration. To say that Akanu was angry would be a gross understatement. He was beyond livid. He may have had his disagreements with Enel, but he didn't for 1 second doubt the word of his fellow Marine. He would always believe a Marine over a pirate. He didn't like the warlords in the first place, to him it was a stupid system that needed to be abolished as soon as possible. Besides, he could feel it from Enel's tone, the seriousness of the situation. To the point where Enel would go against their orders and kill Doflamingo regardless of what Akanu's answer was. Akanu respected that. Even if he didn't like disrespecting orders, he could respect that. An unbending sense of justice, and the will to carry it out regardless of punishments. So, he decided that, for now, he would push his disagreements aside, and that he would help his junior with the backlash. Sengoku. Akanu's angry shout was heard throughout Marineford, scaring a lot of people as the admiral made his way down to the training field, where he knew Sengoku was supposed to be. By the time he reached it, he could see that most of the people there had been expecting him. The Marines were all looking at him worriedly. And Sengoku, who had been apparently sparring with Garp, was looking at him with a bit of frustration in his gaze. Fleet Admiral Sengoku. We have a report that Warlord Donquixote Doflamingo abused his status and took over the kingdom of Dressrosa, enslaving their royal family for his own amusement. The scowl on Akanu's face sent a shiver through the spines of most of the people present. Sengoku looked around a bit with an even more frustrated gaze. This type of news wasn't good to talk about so out in the open after all. How credible is this report? But the cat was already out of the bag. They needed to get to the bottom of the issue as soon as possible. 100%, there is nothing to doubt about it. Akanu said as he walked a bit closer to his superior. Shit, Sengoku's calm broke at that statement. As he punched the sparring field he was on, the wind pushed back all of the people nearby, besides Akanu, who stood unmoved, and Garp, who was also narrowing his eyes at what he was hearing. Give me the details, Akanu. Now. Sengoku quickly started walking toward his office, and Akanu and Garp followed suit. Enel called you about it just now. He gave me that report and told me what he had discovered. He witnessed Doflamingo attacking a member of their royalty in person. Akanu crossed his arms as he spoke. It didn't take long for them to reach Sengoku's office. The fleet admiral clenched his fists a bit when hearing that Enel was involved. Garp also clenched his fists a bit, his usual relaxed expression turning into a displeased one for a few seconds. Doflamingo is a former celestial dragon. And he should also be as strong as a top cadre from a Yonko's crew. Please tell me Enel isn't going to do anything by himself. Sengoku spoke as he sat down on his chair. His goat walked up to him and tried to calm him down a bit. Enel has already assured me that Doflamingo won't be alive the next time we hear about the situation, Akanu said, his tone not wavering for a second. What? This isn't a joke, Akanu. Enel is strong, but Doflamingo is also strong, and he has all of his cadres with him. We'd need an admiral, at least 3 vice admirals and 10 rear admirals along with a lot more soldiers to take a pirate crew of that size down. Sengoku had already thought of the logistics of attacking Doflamingo, and he knew some of the people in the warlord's crew. He knew that taking them down would need a decent investment. Akanu didn't even seem fazed by that. Neither did Garp, who relaxed visibly upon hearing that Enel was the one reporting this. Rear Admiral Enel is more than capable enough to deal with this. Both Akanu and Garp thought about that, but Akanu was the one to voice it, surprising both of the other people in the room. Didn't expect you to be the one to vouch for his strength. Garp said with a hearty laugh. He wasn't exactly concerned about Doflamingo being a celestial dragon, so he didn't think much of the situation. He felt a bit conflicted when hearing how the warlords were taking advantage of their authority to such an extent, but he had never liked the warlord system in the first place. He had been one of the people against it. Still, he didn't hold it against Sengoku, knowing that the fleet admiral couldn't go against the world government. Enel has proven himself capable enough. I was also able to witness his strength. Very few people in this world can match his speed, and just as few can properly react to it. He is precise and deadly. If he fights to kill someone like that dog, Doflamingo won't last even a minute. Okainu said with a scoff. He remembered how easily Enel had blown off his head. He wasn't able to use observation due to his anger at that time, but he couldn't even see the blow, let alone react to it in time. Enel was, by all definitions, one of the fastest marines alive at the moment. The only person that Akainu believed to surpass Enel in speed was Kizaru, another admiral. And that spoke volumes of Enel's strength. Still, this isn't just about him. If he succeeds in killing Doflamingo, then another slew of problems will arise regarding this matter. Sengoku rubbed his forehead as the frustration that had been mounting turned into a headache. I plan to take full responsibility for this matter. Enel is currently acting under my direct orders, Akainu said with a steely gaze, completely shocking the others as well. Garp smiled widely at that. Didn't think this guy had it in him to actually make Akainu respect him to this extent. If you're willing to take responsibility, then at least Enel won't become a wanted man or a slave. But they will most likely still force me to demote him, Sengoku said as he ran his hands through his afro. Akainu scoffed a bit at that. He didn't like Enel being the rank that he was, as he was still lacking basic knowledge that some marine recruits had. But he knew that Enel was deserving of such a rank. Anyone sent on missions to deal with Yonko crews deserved to be called the backbone of the Marines, to be at the top so that others could look up to them and appreciate their efforts. Ha! Let them try, see if they dare. Since Sakazuki here is doing it, then I'm also gonna dip my hands into this shit pie that we're baking. Garp ended up saying he wasn't about to let only Enel and Akainu take slack for that matter. Especially since he fully agreed with their actions. If Akainu was willing to stick out his neck for Enel, then he sure as hell would support the two of them. Seeing that both Garp, the famed marine hero, and Akainu, the favorite admiral of the world government, were supporting Enel, Sengoku could only sigh. So much paperwork. Fine. You two will take full responsibility for this and placate the world government. Now we need to wait on Enel to update us. Sengoku had simply decided to let the situation run its course. Sengoku was still rather shocked that Akainu was willing to vouch for Enel, especially after their last few interactions. Thing is, Akainu didn't even consider that he was sticking up for Enel as an individual. To him, he was simply supporting a fellow Marine's justice. As Marines, they had the right to act and deliver absolute justice to all deserving criminals. Akainu was livid when hearing that such a criminal was under their noses the whole time. He obviously knew that Doflamingo was a rat, but he didn't think he'd dare enslave an entire kingdom's royal family. To him, if Enel had said that he was retreating, he wouldn't have blamed him. Maybe he would have looked down on him a bit, but he wouldn't have blamed him. He knew that Doflamingo wasn't made a warlord for no reason. However, regardless of that, he would have rushed to Dressrosa himself and killed the entirety of Doflamingo's crew and Doflamingo himself without any hesitation. At least he was saved from a pointless journey, and he only needed to deal with the world government. Akainu released a rare smile as he walked out of the fleet admiral's office. That bastard better not let any of these dirty pirates escape. Chapter 40, Conqueror's Haki and Swiftness. Point of view: Doflamingo. There I was, rushing back to the palace at the greatest speed I can muster. The earlier hit had dealt a few internal injuries, but nothing I can't fix with a few stitches using my devil fruit. At least I was able to tell my cadres to all head to the palace. Enel won't be an easy opponent, and I am unsure if I could take him on by myself. Jack the Drought was a lot more resilient than me, and there's not even a hair of him left. This Enel person must be hiding a lot of his strength, otherwise, I don't see how he'd be able to kill Jack without leaving a single trace. No one would believe me if I said that Enel killed Jack, but I know what happened. No one else on this side of the New World, not even an admiral, would be able to quietly snuff out someone like Jack. Yet Enel managed to do it somehow. I also have a few hidden cards. From here on out I'll try to not let him get close to me. At this point, that blasted rear admiral must have already called the headquarters, and Viola, that stupid wench, is also there to testify against me. I don't understand where she suddenly gained this confidence from, but after I kill Enel I will also kill her, as she's already outlived her usefulness long ago. I've never felt this angry before. Not even when my brother tried to betray me. But how can I not feel this much rage? When the empire I painstakingly built is about to collapse right in front of me. And all of it is because of that stupid rear admiral. Rising star of the Marines my ass. I don't care if I get in trouble for this anymore, as long as I get to at least kill him, then everything will be fine. The Marines wouldn't dare to touch me anyway. The world government will cover for me since I used to be a celestial dragon. I might lose some things, but I'm sure the rest of my cadres can escape if the worst happens. I'll stop thinking about that. For now, I'll concentrate on Enel, the one at fault for this whole mess. Point of view narration. Enel disappeared from the hallway and Viola was left there, clutching his coat as it was still wrapped around her tightly. She closed her eyes as she told a silent prayer, hoping that everything would end well for her family. Then she heard a large boom, and every window in the palace was broken instantly. She quickly started running to find the rest of her family, hoping to be able to get to them and form some type of force to fight Doflamingo's pirates. She knew Enel was strong, but she didn't know if he would be able to deal with every soldier under Doflamingo all at once, so she was rushing to assist him as best she could. Meanwhile, Doflamingo had been rushing to the castle, finally calming down his mind and spreading his observation hockey as far as he could. In that same instant, Enel had appeared in front of him. The rear admiral's gauntleted fist had already almost made contact with his face. A sickening crunch was heard as the punch connected Enel, sending Doflamingo flying in a downward spiral. But, even though he heard a crunch, Enel knew that he had barely done any damage. Doflamingo was sent hurtling towards the ground, but he had managed to protect himself with armament just in time, having used observation at the right moment to sense Enel approaching. Doflamingo didn't have future sight, so even though he could feel Enel's approach, he still couldn't react in time to that attack. But spiritual energy moved much faster than Doflamingo's body, so armament was thankfully still useful to block Enel's attacks. Enel had still managed to bend Doflamingo's nose in an odd shape with that punch, but Enel knew that such an injury didn't mean anything to someone like Doflamingo. The warlord was quick to spin a few webs and broke his fall completely as he landed on his strings. Enel, don't think you're going to make it out of this alive. Doflamingo's threads quickly rushed at Enel, trying to entangle him and cut him to pieces. Enel used Jeppo, getting out of the way and arriving on a random building. The people below were panicking, but Enel didn't have the time to worry about them. He would still avoid hitting anyone in the streets. He would also make sure that Doflamingo's attacks didn't bother anyone either. There was also another annoying member of Doflamingo's crew. Young master. Allow me to assist you. An annoyingly high-pitched voice sounded from the side. Enel turned around to see Pika, one of Doflamingo's elite officers, about to dive into the earth. Enel knew that Pika could control earth and stone. He also knew that Pika was annoying to fight and that he could cause a lot of collateral damage and endanger a lot of the people in Dressrosa. So the rear admiral decided to act quickly in order to stop him. Doflamingo's threads couldn't even catch his afterimage, as Enel appeared in front of Pika, much to the shock and horror of Doflamingo. Pika, run! The warlord shouted as his threads did their best to catch up to Enel, but he wasn't close enough to reach Pika in time. Pika wasn't exactly a pushover. He coated his entire body in haki, preparing to receive a strike from Enel. The cadre tried to continue getting into the ground, but it was already too late. Enel simply pointed his finger at Pika's chest. Heart stopper, he said as he tapped the cadre's chest and sent an electric pulse into his body. The electricity ignored Pika's haki as it reached his heart directly and paralyzed it instantly. The giant cadre tried to clutch at his chest, but he couldn't. He felt his muscles become numb in that split second. They weren't listening to him, and then his vision started becoming blurry. What? His voice became weaker with each syllable that came out of his mouth. The cadre collapsed to the ground in the very next second. Although Enel had called the move Heartstopper, it also fried the victim's brain, as Enel knew that some monsters in the world of One Piece could still survive with their hearts stopped for a few minutes. Pika! Doflamingo shouted. Finally he started using his awakened devil fruit. Threads arose from the streets as Doflamingo's anger got the better of him. He had only been caught off guard for a few seconds, and one of his cadres was already on the ground. Worst of all, he had no idea yet how Enel had managed to do it. To him, and all of the people observing, Enel had just approached Pika, tapped him on the chest once, and then Pika seemed to try to clutch at his heart and collapsed. Enel used Jeppo, breaking away from the ground as threads arose from all around him, trying to entangle him and break him apart. "Are you finally taking this seriously?" Enel said as he turned into a blur, appearing by Doflamingo's side. This time, the warlord was expecting him though. A cloak of thick and blackened threads blocked Enel's staff, creating sparks as the shockwave broke a few nearby buildings. "Don't play with me," Doflamingo said as he finally started releasing his conqueror's haki towards his enemy. Enel simply retreated for a bit and let the sensation wash over him. "So this is it, huh? The willpower of the strongest people in this world." Enel basked in that feeling as he then noticed something else. "This doesn't feel like anything special." His eyes flashed with light as he looked at Doflamingo's angered face. "Conqueror's haki. If someone like you can do it, then so can I." With a burst of willpower, Enel's aura spread out everywhere around him. The second Enel's aura came into contact with Doflamingo's, lightning seemed to flicker into existence as the skies darkened and the world around them seemed to come to a stop. Doflamingo's eyes were wide open, sweat was filling his brow as he took a step back. Startled or not, his will faltered for a second, and his concentration waned. And Enel took advantage of that split second. Appearing in front of Doflamingo with a white spear already formed in his hand, turning black as armament covered it. And a forward thrust was all that he needed. Doflamingo didn't have any time to react, the only thing that had saved him was his instinct, and the fact that he already had his strings gathered around him. Enel's spear came into contact with Doflamingo's blackened threads, as the warlord shouted in desperation. The exchange caused even more lightning to occur, it was as if space was breaking around them. Doflamingo couldn't understand, he simply couldn't wrap his mind around it. Why did the marine in front of him suddenly have Conqueror's haki? Doflamingo had never felt it from him before, he had no idea such a thing could even be possible. Even worse than that. Why was it just as strong as his? Enel noticed that he couldn't break through the threads. His newly acquired Conqueror's haki was also somewhat calming down, and he didn't quite have any mastery with it yet. His armament, although a lot stronger than a few weeks back, was still weaker than Doflamingo's. So, Enel was technically supposed to retreat at this point. But he didn't want to do that. He ignored the threads that were trying to pierce him in his back, he ignored the ones that were threatening to impale him. Instead, his staff seemed to deform, completely warping around Doflamingo's string armor, as they sought to touch the warlord only once. And Doflamingo didn't know that, by the time his mind calmed down and he could use observation again, he was already almost entrapped in a blackened metallic sphere. Doflamingo quickly sent as many threads through the gap that still existed in the sphere, hoping to break out of whatever Enel was planning to trap him into. He was quick to follow them, jumping out through that gap without any hesitation. But as he was exiting, a tendril extended and grabbed his legs. He was about to break away from it. But he then felt something else, his powers, the ones he placed so much trust into, faltered. A part of Enel's staff had finally come into contact with one of Doflamingo's legs. Enel smiled as the fight had ended in his mind. And Doflamingo was slammed into the ground by that tendril, as his control over the environment disappeared completely, and all of the attacks coming towards Enel stopped completely. Enel then formed something akin to a medieval man-catcher as he caught Doflamingo's neck in it. The man-catcher was a staff, fitted on one end with what seemed to be a wide collar with spikes pointing inward. Currently, Enel forced Doflamingo to the ground using that staff, and the spikes were all puncturing into the warlord's neck as he screamed in pain. Enel's staff had put Doflamingo out of commission, as Enel then stepped on the warlord's head with enough force to fragment the street underneath him. Enel smiled for a good day's work as he then caught the unconscious Doflamingo in a large sphere made out of his staff, leaving him there as he went on to hunt down the other cadres. The rear admiral didn't even bother to look back at the man he had so swiftly dispatched. Even if he was to try and escape, Enel's observation was covering the entire island. Doflamingo had no chance. Doflamingo's defeat was so sudden that he didn't even get to try using his strongest moves, he had just gotten serious when Enel had unlocked his Conqueror's haki. And the fight was over seconds afterwards. But this was the exact reason why Enel had created his staff. To be able to end battles instantly without much issue. All he needed was to catch his opponent off guard, a split second was more than enough. And then it's over. And it worked like a charm. Enel had walked away from the battle uninjured, and Doflamingo was caught in a sea stone laced ball. The next thing Enel did was to arrive behind Sugar, who he knew was the key to getting everyone to hate Doflamingo. She was somewhere in the castle, hiding after hearing the commotion. The little girl didn't even get to react as Enel's staff left a dent in her head, taking her out of commission instantly. Enel didn't feel trouble anywhere nearby, so he assumed that the elite officer was likely away on a mission and continued on with his day while whistling in the palace corridors. Enel then stopped for a bit and smiled, sensing something rather interesting with his hockey. To think he'd get involved as well. Chapter 41, Diamante and Involvement. Point of view narration. News of Doflamingo being attacked by a marine was quickly delivered everywhere as Viola did her best to bring out an army to fight against the warlord's numerous forces. Battles were occurring all over the city while Enel faced off against Pika and Doflamingo. By the time Enel finished the two of them, the battles were still starting, so Enel was rather pleased with their response time. It seemed like Viola had prepared for something like this already. The first thing she was planning to do was to make her way towards the arena, to look for her niece Rebecca and hopefully convince the gladiators to help her. But as she was making her way there, every doll on the street seemed to be turning back into humans as Enel had already finished off Sugar. The second the dolls turned back into humans, the public started remembering what Doflamingo had done. Pirates and marines transformed from dolls to humans, and now they all started heading for the palace with one goal in mind: kill Doflamingo. Doflamingo's forces now had their hands full as Viola kept making her way towards the arena. As she reached the arena, she surprisingly ran into Kairos, who she now could finally remember, her brother-in-law. He was alive, missing a leg, but alive. Their reunion was rather short-lived though, as Diamante, who had been in the arena and was going to start making his way towards the palace, attacked the two of them brutally. Viola was almost cut in two, if not for Kairos, who pushed her out of the way quickly. Ha ha ha. Seeing you two royal rats struggle like that is so funny. Diamante shouted as he figured he'd just enjoy himself in the end. There was no way Doflamingo would lose after all. And even if Sugar was knocked out temporarily, everything would return to normal. They'd just have a lot more dolls than before. Diamante licked his blade with a sadistic smile as he then swung it, making it flexible and using it like a whip to slash at Viola and Kairos. The two of them both jumped to the side. Kairos was lamenting the fact that he had just turned into a human. He had his sword, but he was still slowly getting used to his movements, and Viola was trying to figure her way out of the situation. Kairos. To think I'd be fighting the former champion of the arena in the flesh. Too bad you are pretty helpless right now. Diamante was about to start talking more and more about his enemies, playing mind games. What he failed to notice was a giant man that had just walked into the battlefield with a large bag on his back. That tall man was missing an arm and a leg, his orange hair was weird, arranged into three curved sections, and he also had a short, spiky beard. It was none other than Charlotte Oven. He had been collecting ingredients like Enel had asked him to before the animated puppets he saw everywhere all turned into humans and the riot started. He then saw signs of fighting everywhere in the city, so he decided to check the nearest ones to him. He was rather curious, and he was confident that he would be able to deal with most enemies without any trouble. He then saw Viola. He didn't think much about her, but he noticed that she had a rear admiral's coat around her shoulders, which made him raise an eyebrow. I saw a few marines get turned back from dolls. But that coat seems pretty familiar. Oven tilted his head for a bit, then he noticed something. A grease stain on the justice sign. A bit of sweat filled his brow as he remembered Enel using it as a napkin to wipe his mouth after eating some sea king meat. Yep, it's his. Oven let out a small chuckle, finally getting the attention of the people involved. Kairos had already seen him, so he wasn't surprised. The gladiator only hoped that Oven was not an enemy, as Diamante was already troublesome enough. And Viola was a bit intimidated as she realized who the person laughing was. Charlotte Oven. What is someone like you doing here? Diamante asked as his eyes widened a bit. Oven completely ignored him though, looking at Viola and asking. Hey. The marine that gave you that coat, did he have really long earlobes by chance? He asked as he stretched his legs leg and peg leg a bit. Viola's eyes widened, hoping that the pirate in front of her wasn't an enemy of her benefactor. Don't bother answering, I know he did. He's not even insecure about them, I don't understand how. Oven said as he dashed towards Diamante, his fist cocked backwards as he struck the ground where the elite officer had been. Diamante had managed to slip away from the attack, but the shockwave sent him flying into the wall of the arena, making a small dent in it. Kairos was relieved that the giant man wasn't their enemy, Viola even more so, making a mental note that Oven was likely an ally of Enel. What is the meaning of this? Our dealings with the Big Mom pirates are still ongoing. We aren't enemies. Diamante shouted as he looked at Oven with a panicked face. There's no helping it since that guy got involved. The deal's falling through since Doflamingo won't be around to keep his end of the deal. Oven said as he shook his fist a bit, flicking a bit of rubble around. There's no way Doflamingo would lose. Doesn't matter even if his opponent is an admiral. Diamante had absolute confidence in his captain. He had no idea that Doflamingo was taken out of the fight in seconds due to his carelessness. Ha! Sure. Oven then stretched his hockey-clad arm to grab Diamante. The elite officer was quick to bend like a flag in the wind and dodged the attack. At this point, Diamante was also getting angry, so he decided to start fighting as well. He turned his sword into a whip once more and started trying to attack Oven as best he could. Charlotte Oven wasn't intimidated by the undulating sword though, he simply reached out and grabbed it without any issue. Diamante was a bit shocked, but he should have expected at least that much out of someone from a Yonko's crew. Then, Oven did as his name implied, and melted the blade entirely using his devil fruit. Diamante was shocked, letting go of the sword and tapping his hands on the ground, making it unsteady and wavy. This only served to annoy Oven though, and it wasn't like he was alone. Kairos was also there, and he had a score to settle as Diamante had been the one to kill his wife, Viola's sister. The former gladiator dashed towards Diamante, unbothered by the fact that he was missing a leg. That action alone made Oven somewhat respect him, as he was in a bit of a similar situation body-wise. Diamante shrieked as he dodged a slash from Cryos only to be hit by Oven's fist directly and crushed into the ground. Oven didn't let go of him though, clutching him tightly with his hacky-clad hand and raising him up. Diamante tried to break out of Oven's hand, but was ultimately unable as Oven's grip was too tight to slip out of. Oven was about to crush Diamante, but Kairos tapped him on the back, which made him stop for a moment. What? The Yonko pirate said as he turned his head and looked the much shorter man in the eye. I want to be the one to finish him off, Kairos said with his eyes narrowed, looking at Oven without any fear. Oven looked a bit at the gladiator, then at Viola who seemed a bit stressed by the whole situation. In the end, he sighed as he dropped Diamante on the ground, finally letting the elite officer of the Donkiot pirates take a breath of fresh air. Whatever. Do what you want. Oven said as he walked off to the side, not really caring to get involved any further. He had only gotten involved because he realized that Viola was likely Enel's associate. Beyond that, he didn't care about Doflamingo's crew or anything that was happening in Dressrosa. Thank you for the help, Kairos said as he then stabbed his blade into Diamante without any hesitation. Viola heaved a sigh of relief and continued running into the arena to speak to her niece. Running past Oven and only giving the giant man a look of appreciation. Oven continued to walk the streets unbothered by whatever was happening in the kingdom of Dressrosa. Chapter 42, Death and Hunt. Point of view Enel. I don't know what I was expecting, honestly. I'm able to. Look at this whole island. The way Doflamingo separated families and made people forget about their loved ones is something I had forgotten about for a bit. I mean, if I knocked out Sugar I would have had enough reasons to take him down as he also turned Marine officers and world government agents into toys. Now that I think about it, my momentary lapse in memory regarding that might just be related to Sugar's fruit. It's really one of the most demented in the series. Thankfully, I at least remembered that Sugar turned everyone into toys, but I had also kinda forgotten about Kairos in general, which means I was affected by her fruit too. Curious. At least everything turned out fine. Well, the situation isn't over, but there aren't all that many people left from Doflamingo's side. Most of his associates were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Even civilians picked up weapons to fight against his rule. If I leave him in the streets then he will 100% be killed by the civilians. And I don't want that to happen. He enslaved an entire kingdom, and I wanted their royal family to be the ones to kill him. He will still die, there's no question regarding that. But I didn't feel that he should die by my hand at first. But I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. I need to kill him quickly, and, now that I think about it, if I give the honors to someone from the Riku family, Dressrosa's royal line, then the world government might try to harm them. The government is so deluded that they'd go out of their way to protect any celestial dragon, even a former celestial dragon turned pirate that technically enslaved an entire country. But I doubt the world government suddenly cares about people or slavery. So it shouldn't surprise me. It was a lot more surprising to see someone like Oven actually help people. He's not exactly been shown as a positive character in the series, but I guess he's gone through plenty of changes in a relatively short time. It might also just be because Viola is still wearing my coat, but the fact that he helped someone associated with me is even more shocking, as I am a Marine, for now, and he is a pirate. I can sense that Viola and Rebecca have already met and Diamante is dead by Kairos's hand. Oven went back to collecting spices, looting from stores. By the looks of it, he's ignoring most of the conflict around. I would go to Viola to grab my transponder snail, but I don't feel like interrupting her reunion with Kairos and Rebecca, so I'll hold off on that. First, I'll finish off Doflamingo. There's someone else already with him too, so I should act now. Point of view narration. Donquixote Doflamingo was stuck. He didn't understand how he had lost everything had happened too quickly, and he was left trapped in a ball of what he assumed to be white gold and sea stone. He tried to struggle, to break out, but he really had no chance after being weakened by sea stone. His physical strength wasn't that bad, so he could still somewhat try to struggle. But Enel's staff was made of rather sturdy metals, so he was stuck in the end. Young master. Doflamingo heard a shout from the side. He couldn't turn around and see who it was, but he could recognize the voice of one of his subordinates. Monet. What is the situation in the kingdom? Also, get me out of here, quickly. He was quick to give orders to her, trying to assess the situation as best he could. Young master. Most of our people are down. I don't know what happened to Sugar, but every doll is back to being a human. Monet said as she ran toward him in a panic. Are you serious? Where the hell is Trebol? He was supposed to protect Sugar at all costs. Doflamingo was quick to lose his temper, as he wasn't exactly in the most flattering of positions. Why, young master, you sent Trebol away on a mission earlier today. Monet said as her voice trembled a bit. She quickly got to work through, using her devil fruit to try and cut through the strange sphere that imprisoned her master. Doflamingo scowled a bit as he thought about ways to salvage the situation. But he didn't have a lot of time to think. Wow, I leave you alone for a few minutes and now you're already trying to escape? Enel appeared on the sphere, crouching down near Doflamingo's head and looking at Monet with a raised eyebrow. The green-haired snow woman was quick to dash at Enel, trying to kick him away from Doflamingo, but she was unfortunately outmatched as Enel simply intercepted her kick with a hockey-enhanced fist, breaking one of her legs in the process and sending her flying upwards. Doflamingo at this point was cracking his teeth out of anger. The veins on his forehead were pulsing visibly, to the point where Enel thought he was having a heat stroke or a regular stroke. Enel tapped the sphere with his staff, absorbing most of the metal back into the staff, leaving only a few sea stone-laced chains wrapped around the warlord. What do you plan, Enel? I doubt you're stupid enough to actually kill M-. Doflamingo's monologue was stopped by Enel's spear attempting to pierce through his chest. The warlord's eyes widened in shock as the worst thing he could imagine just happened right in front of him. He managed to use armament to completely cover his chest just in time, but Enel's spear point also turned black. Everything slowed down for the two of them, as lightning once again sparked into existence. A clash of conkers. This time Doflamingo was pulling no stops, struggling as his life was on the line. And Enel's anger was put on full display, as his spear seemed driven to pierce the warlord's heart. Doflamingo grit his teeth as he did his best to block Enel's spear from reaching its intended target. In this exchange, the only thing that could save him was his willpower. If he was strong enough, then maybe he'd be able to block that spear. Maybe it'd give Monet enough time to fly back to him and free him from those chains. But the world was never kind to Doflamingo. The chains around him pulled him towards the spear point. He could now feel the spear, slowly piercing his skin and muscle tissue, as he was helpless to act, the sea stone still stopping him from fighting back completely. Doflamingo couldn't help but scream internally, about the unfairness of the situation, of how he refused to resign himself to such fate. Commendable will, but Enel's desire to kill him was even greater. In the end, the stronger will overcame the weaker one. With Enel's spear piercing through Doflamingo's chest completely, the warlord gasped as he felt the spear point leave a hole in his heart. Enel then pulled out his spear from Doflamingo's chest, turning it back into a staff and attracting the chains back to it. He took a step back and studied the dying warlord. Doflamingo stumbled forwards a bit. He looked genuinely confused. His usual smile was turned completely upside down as blood flowed from his mouth. He stretched his hand towards Enel, seemingly attempting to strangle the rear admiral in his last breath, only to fall forwards, unable to move forward. Heh. You probably think this is all my fault. That I was the one responsible for all of your problems. Enel said as he crouched down a bit, talking casually in the warlord's final moments. In truth, you did all of this to yourself. You were the one in control of your own life, you made your choices. And this is where they led you. Enel was mostly just speaking to himself at this point, not really gloating, just idly chatting by as he waited for Doflamingo to draw his last breath. The warlord couldn't even hear Enel's words, as he was far too focused on seeing his life flash in front of his eyes. Young master! Monet shouted as she flew towards Doflamingo using her devil fruit powers. Enel didn't bother to stop her either, as he didn't see how she'd be able to help Doflamingo at that point. She seemed to grab his bleeding body within her arms as she wept. Enel tilted his head a bit as he tried to remember what connection the two of them were even supposed to have. He remembered Doflamingo somewhat caring for his close confidants, but he didn't remember much about Monet. Regardless, she was an officer in Doflamingo's army, so he swung his staff, hitting her across the head much like he did her little sister, Sugar. With her knocked out, he simply walked off to deal with the rest of the officers in Doflamingo's army. Not many people could face them within Dressrosa, and Enel wanted to end the war already, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He planned to knock out people like Baby 5 and Senior Pink, the others he didn't really care about much. Viola, Rebecca and Kairos were still hugging it out and reuniting. They were also joined by the former king, Ricudaldo III, who had apparently been cosplaying as a gladiator for some reason. It was a rather touchy reunion, one that, once again, Enel didn't feel like crashing. So Enel continued on his way to hunt down the other officers still in Dressrosa. Hey there! Thanks for listening. I will post the next chapters next week. If you dig this story, hit the like button so I know which one to post more of. And if you can't wait, the name of the story is in the description.